With a mission to deliver fiscally responsible, highly dependable services to the citizens of our community and the region. With integrity and professionalism, this is the City of Albany Commission Meeting with Mayor Bo Duro, John Howard, Ward 1, Mayor Pro Tem Matt Fuller, Ward 2, BJ Fletcher, Ward 3, Chad Warbington, Ward 4, Bob Langstaff, Ward 5, Demetrius Young, Ward 6, with Interim City Manager Stephen Carter, City Clerk Sonia Tolbert, and City Attorney Nathan Davis. This is the City of Albany Commission Meeting.
Welcome, and we'll call to order the special call meeting. Today is Tuesday, July 20th, 2021. Ms. Tolbert, would you call the roll, please?
Ward 1.
Here.
Ward 2.
Here.
Ward 3.
Here.
Ward 4.
Ward 4 is here.
Ward 5. Ward 5.
Ward 5 is here.
Ward 6.
Here.
Mayor.
Mayor's here. Can we read the call, please, ma'am?
Yes. July 13, 2021, I'm sorry. Dear Mayor and Commissioners, there will be a special call meeting, virtual meeting, and in person on Tuesday, July 20th at 8:30 a.m. in room 100 of the Government Center building located 222 Pine Avenue, Albany, Georgia. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss and/or approve the following ordinances. The first one is amending Article 2 of Chapter 2 of the Code of Ordinances regarding July meetings. And the second one is rescinding the requirement of mask or face covering in city-owned buildings. It's signed by the mayor, and all the commissioners were notified via email.
Thank you. The first item is actually just to accommodate those members of the commission who wish to attend the hearing on the redistricting, reapportionment, and that's next Tuesday at 5 o'clock, so this meeting would be rescheduled until Wednesday, June 28th. Any discussion on this item? Commissioner Howard?
No discussion on the item, but Mr. Mayor, I did realize that we did get an email that the meeting for the State Redistricting Committee is going to be here next Tuesday, and the location is Albany State West Campus.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
No discussion.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No discussion.
Commissioner Warbington?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No discussion.
Commissioner Young?
No discussion.
Okay. Would any member of the commission wish to offer the ordinance?
I offer the ordinance to ask for unanimous consent with the second reading. Second.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Commissioner Howard?
No further discussion.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No discussion.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Warbington?
So we're talking about moving it to Wednesday, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. No discussion.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No discussion.
Commissioner Young?
No discussion.
Okay. With that, could we call the roll for the vote?
Sure. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
Ward 5 is a yes.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Mayor.
Mayor votes yes. The next item on the agenda is a proposal to rescind the requirement of to wear masks or coverings in city-owned buildings. We had discussed this previously. I think Commissioner Young asked for some information on the numbers. Did you get that information, Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Well, with that, I have previously expressed the concerns with the CDC guidelines. We're aware that 14 days after the second vaccination, people have been advised they can go without wearing a mask indoors, and also it's almost impossible to police who has been vaccinated, who hadn't, and clearly we would encourage everyone to continue to wear masks, but as far as having a policy that we need to enforce, I don't really think that's practical at this juncture. But any other thoughts on that? Commissioner Howard?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. As you said, following the CDC and the World Health Organization, I think that for the betterment of this community and this portion of Southwest Georgia, I think rescinding this and lifting the mask would be a mistake, as you stated earlier, that it's almost impossible to say who has been vaccinated, who's going to tell you the truth. And I think from a health point of view, that city-owned buildings and city employees should continue to wear the mask, because there has been reports that the Delta variant is in all 50 states, and mainly in southeastern parts of the United States, in a lot of rural and unincorporated areas, you've seen a proliferation of individuals being admitted back to the medical facility. And I did pull something down from the Department of Public Health this morning. I think yesterday they had like 2,200 cases that tested positive in the state of Georgia. And of course, we know in Albany and Dougherty County that we was the ep of the world at one time back in last year. And I think that I'm continuing to wear my mask. I'm concerned. In other words, I'm a little frightened, because a lot of individuals have these underlying health issues, and they're not going to expose themselves to others or tell folks that got it. So the only thing I can say to this board, that I think that if we lift this mask ordinance from city-owned building, it probably would be a grave mistake, because we don't want to see the spike of those individuals that would test positive. So I think that it should stay in place until we get some further the guidelines from the CDC and the World Health Organization and our local medical facility, Phoebe Putney. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mayor Pro Tem.
I think we just need to continue to encourage our citizens to be vaccinated. And it's very, very easy to get it done now. Very, no wait. You can get right in and get it done. So I think we just need to continue to encourage that. Thank you.
Mr. Fletcher?
No discussion.
Commissioner Warmington?
No discussion.
Commissioner Langstaff? I just wanted to point out that with the county rescinding the Arrington County buildings and us sharing the building with the county, it would make it very difficult to enforce. So I'm fine with rescinding it in city building.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. I echo the comments of Commissioner Howard. With the data that we're seeing with the rise in the cases of the variant, I don't think this is the time to rescind the face covering. I think the county may have made their decision based on what was probably the conditions maybe a month or more ago, where it looked like we were going to come out of this thing and not necessarily be dealing with this in the way that we dealt with it earlier in the year. I was looking at the news coming here this morning, and even our Olympic athletes who have been vaccinated are coming up positive with the COVID virus. And it's been other cases where people who have been vaccinated are still, showing up with positive cases. So, especially with, I think our vaccination rate is relatively low here in Albany. And, due to that fact, I think we really ought to look at it. The variant in itself is very, they're saying it's much more contagious even than the previous, I think the original strain of the COVID virus. So I think it, behooves us to keep all protections in place, whether that's wearing a mask, washing your hands, as well as requirements in public places to wear face masks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, obviously, those are legitimate concerns. We're aware this is a rapidly evolving issue with this Delta variant. You see, I think Israel's got the highest vaccination rate in the country, and people are actually, who have been fully vaccinated, are actually contracting the Delta variant. However, very few of those people are becoming seriously ill. The information's out there. The number of folks who are going to get vaccinated is probably flatlined for several months. You can't convince folks that are not going to be vaccinated to be vaccinated, and there's been an observation that we're on the verge of a pandemic among the unvaccinated. But my motivation in bringing this forward is that we have a policy that we can't realistically enforce, and we can't expect staff to do it. As Commissioner Langstaff said, this is a joint building we own with the county, and that is my reason. I think obviously we would encourage all citizens and maybe even require our employees to wear masks. But as far as dealing with the public, and I understand, I have been contacted by some city employees who have expressed concerns that people come in and they have to deal with the public and folks aren't vaccinated. But this is just a dilemma, but I do think at this point in time it's virtually impossible to practically and efficiently enforce the mandate, and that's why I'm suggesting and so move that we rescind the mask mandate.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, could I, is there, so I would offer the ordinance and ask for unanimous consent to dispense with second reading and ask for its adoption. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Yes, Commissioner Howard.
Mr. Mayor, I do realize that we do share buildings with our sisters and brothers across the hall on the county, but I think, as you mentioned, it's hard to enforce, but I think that it would be in the best interest of this commission that we do share this building with the county, is that when we have city commission meeting, I think that it's a city function that we still could have those posters on the board that when we have our work session and commission meeting, that social distance, and we should still wear the mask inside the building once we come into the foyer of the city commission meeting.
Anything further, Mr. Howard?
That's it.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Nothing further.
Mr. Fletcher?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Worthington?
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Carter. I don't know why we did an ordinance, but do you need an ordinance as a city manager to make any kind of restrictions on a building, or to put signs on the door, or is that something that, as a city manager, you have, like right now, utilities building is limited. That was done, I guess, via your discretion, not based on us, but do you have the power to do those sorts of things without our involvement?
Yes, we can. For those things that apply to city employees, I can still mandate those things happen for city employees. Since we share the building, the mandate that I've given everybody thus far is because you are a city employee, you're still going to follow the city rules. So in those city rules, city employees have to follow those rules that's set by me.
Right. Did the county pass an ordinance, or was that a
The county
staff
didn't pass an
decision?
ordinance.
Sir?
I don't think the county passed an ordinance when they.
Okay, so their staff, their county administrator just made the decision for
Right.
their mask ordinance?
Correct.
Okay. So I would just say going forward, certainly, Mr. Carter and Mr. McCoy, if we were to have some concern, or they were to have some immediate concern, the two of them could immediately collaborate, make whatever decision. So I would just ask that we ought to continue to stay consistent with them, and if you and Mr. McCoy, for whatever reason, need to make that decision, obviously keep us posted, but certainly we would rely on staff to make that decision and not have to come back and do another ordinance You feel like you have that power to do that without an ordinance?
I do, and I was waiting for you guys to make a decision on this ordinance before I did anything with city employees, because I can't mandate something that you have already set as a rule.
That's right.
So I had to wait until you guys decide what you're gonna do before I can make any kind of statement on that.
Okay, all right. That's it, Mayor. Thanks.
Commissioner Langstaff?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. I think we really need to consider that this is a public safety and a public health issue, and not lose sight of it, you know, based on the politics of it, or whether or not it's an ordinance, or whether or not, you know, through some function of government, who has the power to do what, but be guided by the science. The biggest issue with this is that we're losing sight of the fact that masks work. We were all told that during the mask mandate discussion when we passed the first ordinance. All of our local health officials, you know, from the top down, told us that, you know, masking up works, and that is the biggest protection in stopping the spread of the virus. Now, we can't, you know, mandate, of course, that people go get vaccinated. We can't, you know, mandate to the virus that it doesn't come into our community. But what we can do is, you know, look out for public safety, look out for public health and our citizens by requiring that, you know, we protect ourselves and protect each other, you know, using masks. And that's the larger story here, is that, you know, we have something simple that we all can do to, you know, just protect ourselves until this thing is over. It's not over. It is not over. And I think we ought to be guided by the science and not necessarily guided by, you know, the decisions of other boards. If that's what they want to do and that's in their purview to do, that's fine. But, you know, as far as this board that we're a part of, we need to be guided by the real-time situation and the science that backs that mask wearing works and protects people. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Young. And again, this amendment would not curb the city manager's authority to make decisions about city employees, but it is the public, and like I say, I see it as just a matter of how we're going to practically address a situation where there's no longer a mask mandate in effect outside, and the county has made this decision. But clearly, as Commissioner Warmington said, Mr. McCoy and Mr. Carter can work together to assure there is no ongoing conflict with jointly owned buildings. But with that, Mr. Harper, could we call the roll?
No.
Yes.
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 Ward 5,
Ward 5 is yes.
Mayor.
Ward 6?
I'm sorry, Ward 6,
No.
Mayor.
Mayor votes yes. That concludes the special call meeting, and now we will proceed to the work session. The first item on the agenda is consideration of an appointment to Chehaw Park Authority. One appointment for a 3-year term ending June 2024. And there are 2 applicants, Ms. Carrie Hutchinson and Mr. David Daniels, Jr. And the information is in your packet. We will vote on that next Wednesday night. Next item on the agenda is consideration for approval of travel. Can we take these, I guess, together? Or we need to take them separately?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I move that under B, traveling, that we approve 1 through 5.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion regarding the request for approval of travel? Commissioner Howard,
No further discussion.
Mayor Pro Tem,
No discussion.
Commissioner Fletcher,
No discussion.
Commissioner Worthington,
No discussion.
Commissioner Langstaff,
No discussion.
Commissioner Young.
No discussion.
Okay. Do we call that for a vote, Ms. Talbot?
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Mayor.
Mayor votes yes. The next item on the agenda is designation of the voting delegate to the GMA, upcoming GMA meeting, and appointment of the flag bearer. It looks like Commissioner Howard, Commissioner Worthington, Commissioner Young, and myself will be attending. And would anyone like to serve as the voting delegate and/or the flag bearer?
I volunteer to serve as the voting delegate.
Okay. Commissioner Young has volunteered to serve as a voting delegate. Is anyone willing to be the flag bearer?
I'll do it,
Mr. Mayor.
Or Mr. Howard, Commissioner Howard wants to say what?
Mr. Mayor, since you are going and you have been there in the past, so it would be protocol that you represent the city by the flag bearer.
And Commissioner Howard, Commissioner Worthington's already volunteered to do that. In my experience,
No, Commissioner Howard spoke first.
usually the last person elected, isn't that right, Ms. Talbot?
Yeah.
I take the fifth mayor. I don't think it's protocol. I will say that, but.
My man recollection is a low man on the totem pole, but I guess I came in with Commissioner Young and Commissioner Worthington, so I'm, but yeah, if y'all want me to do it, I guess, unless, you want to take a vote against Commissioner Worthington?
I rescind my own nomination.
Yeah, when you see it, you'll be glad you did. But, okay, with that, I guess, unless there's any objection, we'll let Commissioner Young will serve as a voting delegate, and the mayor will be the flag bearer. So, next, public safety matters. We have 5 applications for alcohol license. The first is Tate's Tavern, which is located at 2422 Sylvester Road. Request for liquor, beer, and wine on-site consumption. Marshall Norman, you with us? Good morning.
Good morning. This
Okay.
is Tate's Tavern LLC, doing business as Tate's Tavern at 2422 Sylvester Road. I submitted an application requesting alcohol license for consumption of liquor, beer, and wine. The applicant is Timothy Tate at 1775 Ironstone Court in Beaufort, Georgia, and the local agent is Cassie Hubbard at 9986 Gravelville Road here in Albany. The type of business is a tavern. The planning department identified this location zone in B3 on an arterial street and in Ward 1. The distance requirement from nearest school is Turnfield Elementary at 2001 Leonard Avenue, over 3,000 feet, and the nearest church is St. Paul Baptist at 2605 Sylvester Road at 1,500 feet. This location was previously licensed as Benchwarmers from 2001 to 2016. There were 3 miscellaneous calls at this location. The police department has no open investigations at this location. The applicant placed an article in the Albany Herald at least 10 days prior to this meeting as notification to the general public that this application would be considered for approval. The applicant and the location meets criteria for approval.
Okay. Thank you, Marshall. Any questions For Mr. Norman, Commissioner Howard,
No question.
Mayor Pro Tem,
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher,
No questions.
Commissioner Warmington.
Yeah, Mr. Norman, so this location, what is it currently now?
It's vacant. There's an old liquor store, and on it, to the east of it and to the west of it is the old Winn-Dixie Shopping Center.
But this location where he's going, it's a standalone building. Is it currently a store now, or?
It's attached to the liquor store.
This is the one on Sylvester Road, not Thornton.
No, this is
Oh,
Sylvester.
okay, okay.
But this is a new applicant, so has it been vacant for 12 months, or why is it a new application if it was already a liquor store?
It's Benchwarmers Bar, closed in 2016. Mr. Case is the owner of the property.
Okay, so it's been closed for 4 years, and he's just wanting to reopen it.
Yes, sir. It's been closed for over 4 years.
Okay, was he the applicant 4 years ago?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Was he the applicant, was he the owner 4 years ago when it was an
He was
active?
the owner, yes, sir, but a different applicant.
Okay, all right, that's it, Mayor. Thanks.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. Can you, I guess, point out, I guess, the number of alcohol outlets within, I guess, that half-mile radius for the public that's listening now?
Right on the skirt of it, you're gonna have, I think it's J&J liquor store, that's gonna be west of it. It's down there by the Pickens Phase, and then we have the billiard place that's down there. North of there, you're gonna have Pilot. Let's see, let's have it on the map. Yeah, north of there, you're gonna have Pilot. South of that location, you're gonna have Ames Convenience Store. And you have a restaurant to the north of there also, the El Patron Mexican restaurant.
Okay. So, I guess I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm just looking at your map here, and not sure how much, I guess, area that this map represents, but I'm just quickly, I'm already counting, 8 alcohol outlets within this particular area. Was any consideration given to the number of alcohol outlets within that particular area?
No, sir.
Okay. What about any? Go ahead.
They all met the distance requirements.
Okay. And was any consideration given to the proximity to residential structures in that area?
Say that again, sir.
Was there any consideration given to the proximity to residential structures in that area?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Norman. And the next application is Crazy Gemini, 312 Thornton Drive, seeking a beer and wine consumption license.
Yes, sir. Crazy Gemini at 314 Thornton Drive has submitted an application requesting an alcohol license for consumption of beer and wine. The applicant is A. Lillian Walker at 511 Nectar Lane here in Albany. The business is a bar. The planning department identifies this location as Zone C2 on a local street in Ward 1. The nearest school is Doherty High School. It's over 1,000 feet, 1800 Pierce Avenue, over 2,000 feet away, and the nearest church is Abundant Life Fellowship Center at 214 East Road, and that's over 3,500 square feet also away. The location was previously licensed as Rumba Tropical, 2012 through 2018. The police has identified no investigations at this location. There were one miscellaneous call over the past 12 months. This applicant placed an article in the Albany Herald at least 10 days prior to this meeting as notification to the general public that the application will be considered. The applicant and the location meet the criteria for approval.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Norman. Any questions? Commissioner Howard?
Mr. Norman, let me ask you a question about a church. When you have a church in a in a shopping center, that's not considered as a standalone building, right, a church?
That's correct. It has to be a standalone building. Correct.
Oh, okay, then thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Mr. Fletcher?
No questions.
Commissioner Worthington?
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. Again, was any consideration given to the proximity of residential structures with this particular application?
No, sir.
Was any consideration given to the proximity of this location to other alcohol outlets within the area?
All the other location was packaged, and the only closest one was El Polento Mexican restaurant, and the distance meets criteria.
Okay, so I'm just asking, was there a consideration about that, their proximity or
Yes, sir.
okay,
Yes, sir, we can use that.
okay, that's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Young. Next is an application for beer and wine consumption, Cracker Barrel Old Country Store at 1114 North Westover Boulevard. Mr. Norman?
Yes, sir. The Cracker Barrel Old Country Store Incorporation doing business at Cracker Barrel number 455 at 1114 North Westover Drive has submitted an application for beer and wine consumption. The applicant is Richard Wolfson at 4012 Copeland Drive, Nashville, Tennessee. The local agent is Adrian Howard at 1519 Whiting Drive here in Albany. The type of business is a restaurant. The planning department identified this location zone in C2 on Arteria Street and in Ward 5. The distance requirement from the nearest school is Deerfield Windsor at 2500 North Nottingham Way. It's over 2,500 feet away. And the nearest church is Grace City at 2504 Archwood Drive, and that's 1,000 feet. The police department has no open investigations at this location. The police called over the past 12 months. There were 6 alarms, 2 building checks, 1 person crime, 1 property crime, and 15 miscellaneous. The applicant placed an article in the Albany Herald 10 days prior to this meeting as notification to the general public that the application will be considered for approval. The applicant and the location meet the criteria for approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Norman. Any questions, Commissioner Howard?
No question.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions.
Commissioner Worthington?
No questions.
Commissioner Langstaff?
No question.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. The only question I have is when did Cracker Barrel start serving alcohol? Does anybody know? I never knew that was in their business model. Because I've never seen the Cracker Barrel serve alcohol. Well, I would, yeah, if we could do some research on that to find out what other Cracker Barrels are serving alcohol.
They started it in Tennessee during COVID.
Okay, all right, during COVID, I got you. Okay, thanks. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Young. Next application is Love's Travel Stops and Country Store at 1737 Clark Avenue, seeking a beer and wine package license. Mr. Norman.
Yes, sir. This is Love Travel Stop and Country Store Incorporation, doing business as Love Travel Stop number 808 at 1737 Clark Avenue. They submitted an application requesting an alcohol license for package sale of beer and wine. Amy Guzzard, the applicant, 1505 Drury Lane in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and the local agent is Daniel Melvin at 2624 Cody Court here in Albany. The type of business is a convenience store with a restaurant. The planning department identified this location as zoned in M1 on a Collector Street and in Ward 1. The distance requirement from the nearest school is Turner Elementary at 2001 Leonard Avenue. That's over 3,000 feet away. The nearest church is Abundant Life at 214 East Road, 1,500 feet away. This is the newly constructed location. The applicant placed an article in the Albany Herald at least 10 days prior to this meeting as notification to the general public that the application will be considered for approval. The applicant and the location meet the criteria for approval.
Thank you, Ms. Norman. Any questions? Commissioner Howard.
Mr. Norman, let me ask you a question. Since that is a busy hotspot now, Love Truck Stop, I'm concerned, I know that it does happen at other truck establishments where there's alcohol or beer being sold, that when most of the truckers that are out of town, they probably will get their beer and probably walk back to the truck, the cab, to sleep that night. But do you think we're going to have a problem with those individuals purchasing beer or wine, and once they get outside the door, just open the can and just start drinking till they get back to the truck?
Well, I feel that the merchant has been notified as far as what the rules are here in Albany, as far as open containers concerned, and I think I would hope that they do their just due and ensure that that doesn't transpire.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mayor Pro Tem.
No questions.
Mr. Fletcher.
No questions.
Mr. Worthington.
No questions.
Mr. Langstaff.
No question.
Ms. Young.
No question.
The next application is Los Amigos Mexican Restaurant at 1514 North Slappy Boulevard, seeking a beer and wine consumption license. Ms. Norman?
Yes, sir. Los Amigos Mexican Restaurant LLC, doing business as Los Amigos Mexican Restaurant at 1514 North Slappy Boulevard, has submitted an application for liquor, beer, and wine. The applicant is Rafael Belize at 447 Kingswood Drive here in Albany. The type of business is a restaurant. The planning department identifies this location zone in 1 on an arterial street and in Ward 2. The distance requirement to the nearest school is Northside Elementary at 901 14th Avenue, 2,000 feet away, and the nearest church is Institutional First Baptist at 1410 North Slappy Boulevard, 500 feet away. This establishment was previously licensed as the House of Yang Chinese Restaurant from 2002 to 2011. It was Moon Song from 2011 to 2013. It was House of You from 2018 to 2020. The police department has no open investigations at this location. Police calls over the past 12 months, 1 criminal trespass and 3 miscellaneous. The applicant submitted an article through the Albany Herald 10 days prior to this meeting as notification to the general public that this application will be considered for approval. The application and the applicant and the location meet the criteria for approval.
Thank you, Ms. Norman. Any questions? Commissioner Howard.
No question.
Mayor Pro Tem.
No questions.
Mr. Fletcher.
No questions.
Mr. Worthington.
No questions.
Mr. Langstaff.
No question.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. We appreciate your presentations this morning.
Yes, sir, thank you.
You have a good day. The next item on the agenda is a proposal to consider a moratorium on, I believe, issuing all alcohol licenses. And Commissioner Young is the presenter of this item.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some time ago, before I came in office, of course, everybody knows the story of the proposed liquor store that was to be put on South Emil King, right across the street from Mount Zion Apartments. One of the reasons that we opposed that location for that liquor store was because it was across the street from a housing complex. It was across the street directly from a residence. You could literally cross the street and be in somebody's front yard from that proposed location. Luckily that the community spoke out about it, and we were able to, generate, some pushback and some support to not have that liquor store be placed in that location. And since I've been on this commission, I've mentioned many times about, where we put these alcohol licenses being a absolute consequence, and a lot of times a negative consequence for our community. There's been discussion about how we make those decisions. We've even talked, and I've heard comments like, well, if somebody just walks up and fills out an application and they have all the proper paperwork, they should just be able to sell alcohol, where if they're a business owner or in there to do business. But I think because of the conditions that we have in this city, with crime, with poverty, with blight, and youth violence, we have to reconsider how we do that and give our ordinance a real tough look. And I was always a proponent that said location, location, location when we thought about these alcohol licenses. And that brought up the situation with what we call alcohol density. Alcohol density is the proximity of these alcohol outlets to each other in your particular community. And when we say alcohol outlets, we're talking about any business that sells alcohol, which will that be on premise, off premise, or otherwise. And that goes up to make the collective of liquor stores, convenience stores, restaurants, and things of that nature. But what I did not know is that there's actually a CDC report that actually gives guidelines about alcohol density, and that's available on the CDC's website. If you just Google CDC alcohol outlet density, and it was very eye-opening in terms of doing research in cities where you have a proliferation of alcohol outlets. They're concentrated in certain areas. They're concentrated right there together, and the problems that they create for the community in terms of course, substance abuse, crime, and general neglect of the neighborhood. Myself and Ms. Amna Faruqi did a lot of, kind of background information on that. And what I'm proposing is that we take 90 days to look at our policies so we can really know what the effect is when we make these decisions to say yay or nay on these alcohol outlets. Because I think, in previous, decisions, we haven't always made the right decisions. We haven't given the proper consideration to the effect that it has on our citizens. So what I'd like to do is form a committee to look at this particular effect of alcohol outlet density and see within 90 days whether or not we should be trying to kind of make a different path, choose a different way in looking at these alcohol outlets. And I wanted to ask a question to Mr. Norman real quickly. Can you tell me exactly the total number of alcohol licenses that we have in the city of Albany? Current operating licenses? That's all restaurants, liquor stores, convenience stores, supermarkets?
I have the exact number for my location, but we're normally around 210, 211.
211.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I don't know where that leaves us, but I know the CDC guidelines, and I'll let Ms. Faruqi talk about that a little bit more. I think Ashley gives, guidance for, is it 1 alcohol outlet per 1,000? Okay, so, that's some of the information that's out there when we're trying to consider these things, but I'll let her talk about it in her presentation as she comes forward.
Good morning. My name is Amna. I think everyone knows me, but I'm here today as the interim president of the NAACP of Albany and Dougherty County to talk about our branch of support of this moratorium, which would pause alcohol license renewals for 90 days while we explore this issue. So if I could go to the next slide, please. So like Commissioner Young outlined, this would put a pause for 90 days and give us as a community an opportunity to really review our processes for how we determine where alcohol licenses go. Next slide. And the reason that the NAACP specifically supports this ordinance is for 3 main reasons. Alcohol density is a public health issue in Albany, Georgia. Alcohol density is an economic development issue in Albany, and alcohol density is a racial justice issue in our community. Next slide. There have been several studies from the CDC, from various think tanks and institutes in rural and urban communities across the country, California, New Jersey, DC, Boston, Baltimore, that show the correlation between high concentration of alcohol density and crime and poverty, specifically domestic violence, which we know is an extremely high form of crime in this community, property theft and damage, which we also know is a common form of crime in this community, and just interpersonal violence, specifically youth violence, which we know when we talk about shootings and violence in this city, a lot of that is directly correlated to how accessible alcohol is. Next slide. Liquor stores often disrupt the social order by sending a message about what illicit crime is, acceptable in a community. I think anyone who lives in this city can see the difference between outlets in the south side and east side and outlets that sell alcohol in the northwest side, all the way going out to Lee County, and how they are kept up and presented by business owners and the kind of environment that they foster in that neighborhood. Liquor stores in low socioeconomic neighborhoods are very different from liquor stores in high socioeconomic neighborhoods, and that's not just true for Albany, that's true for communities across the country. And so when we are just, without any sort of discernment about how we let alcohol outlets open or how we give alcohol licenses throughout neighborhoods in Albany, we are fostering that environment of crime and violence if we're not intentional about where we're actually letting these licenses be given to businesses. Next slide. Studies show that alcohol plays an important rate in intimate partner violence. Again, that's higher, in Black neighborhoods because of the accessibility of alcohol. Next slide. And like Commissioner Young said, the CDC has very strict guidelines on alcohol outlet density because of the fact that it is a public health issue. Next slide. They specifically say that 9 in 10 adult excessive drinkers are not alcohol dependent, are not necessarily alcoholics, they just have access to alcohol more than other people. And the Community Preventative Services Task Force recommends limiting alcohol density. This is something that communities across the country do that Albany would be catching up to if we actually took a 90-day pause to reflect on our own process. There's strong scientific evidence about, the effectiveness of pausing and regulating alcohol density. Next slide, please. I think I've also heard before, that liquor stores and convenience stores that sell alcohol are an example of economic development. And I want to be clear that liquor stores are not an example of good economic development, but people only see them as economic development when they're in majority Black neighborhoods. Economic development is defined as the creation of wealth from which a community benefits, and those benefits are realized. It's more than a jobs program, it's an investment that enhances the prosperity and quality of life for all residents. A lot of these stores that sell alcohol, especially in the south side and the east side of Albany, do not create wealth for that community, do not create a lot of jobs for that community, are oftentimes not owned by people from that community or operated by people who live in that neighborhood or that community. And so it's not actually fostering economic development. It's a sign of food insecurity and food swamps, which is a term when people can only get grocery stores from convenience stores and liquor stores. It lowers property values, which has an effect on, the neighborhoods, on housing and crime. And economic development, especially in smaller cities and rural areas, should always be focused on enhancing the strengths of a community and fostering, a progressive and good environment for children and families. And liquor stores do the opposite of that. Next slide. And I want to be clear, the NAACP, we know that there's a difference when you drive around this city. We would not see a liquor store on Beatty Road or in the middle of a residential neighborhood like Doublegate, the way we see several liquor stores in the middle of residential neighborhoods that are Black neighborhoods in this city. And so that's why this is also a racial justice issue. And Johns Hopkins, the School of Public Health, has shown that in cities across the country, that are majority Black, like Albany, this is an issue, the prevalence of alcohol licenses. Mr. Norman said that we have a little over 200. By the guidance of the CDC, that would be 1 license per 1,000 residents. We really should only have around 70 to 73. But if we have 211, that's significantly more. So if we are serious about this being a good life city, and a good life city for the majority of the residents that live in the city, we have to exercise some discernment about where alcohol licenses go, because it is having an adverse effect on Black residents in this city. Next slide. And I wanted to just also end with cities and counties across the state have practices in place like this. Macon noticed that there was an oversaturation of pawn shops and liquor stores that was having an adverse effect in their community. They introduced an ordinance for an alcohol moratorium similar to this one. Savannah is currently surveying and studying their alcohol outlets, because of the undesirable activity that liquor stores were fostering. Valdosta has, a temporary moratorium. Cleveland, Moultrie, cities across Georgia and towns for different reasons are introducing moratoriums. And so introducing a 90-day moratorium in Albany would just give us a chance as a community to really explore how many alcohol licenses are we approving, where are we approving them, what is our strategy for planning, and really allow the city to be intentional. And that committee can be created, by the city commission with stakeholders from the business community, from residents, of neighborhoods across Albany, community stakeholders, city leaders, to make sure that we're really being thoughtful and intentional. Next slide. And like Commissioner Young said, the movement to stop the liquor store on ML King and Johnny Williams was not the only time residents in this city have spoken out against liquor stores in this community. The fact that we have liquor stores that are more readily available than grocery stores is a problem. And I think when we think about what kind of city do we want to be, how do we want our residents to feel, we have to really think about, what quality of life are we enhancing? How many grocery stores, community centers are we building? Are we investing in, medical facilities, instead of just approving alcohol licenses, without a plan? And so that's why the NAACP is very strongly in support of this moratorium, to pause for 90 days, to create a committee, and to just create a plan to assess alcohol density in this community, and to really create a strategy of how we can improve the quality of life for all residents in this city. And that's it. And last slide is just citations.
Does that conclude your presentation, Ms. Faruqi? Any questions for Ms. Faruqi, Commissioner Howard?
Good morning, Ms. Faruqi.
Good morning.
Thanks for giving us a update on it. And Mr. Mayor, and to the commissioners of this body, I think that what Commissioner Young and Sister Faruqi has done has given us an overview of what our city is going to become if we don't put some type of teeth in our city ordinance that deal with on-premise consumption, off-premise consumption. And there's a growing concern from me, and let me paraphrase it, that when we look at economic growth in this city and where business and individuals are living, as she mentioned earlier, Mr. Mayor, that I think I'm familiar with all 6 wards from east, west, north, and south. And when you go down on Old Dawson Road, you will see at that point north, there's a stop, and you go all the way back round to Beatty Road, and that I think Beatty Road Locker Station connects somewhere up there on Gillenville Road. At the corner, there's a new BP station on Gillenville Road and other areas. That's just a piece of the pie that I'm going to talk about. And I would tell the citizens of these wards, the future of Albany, Georgia is at stake for many reasons. Whether we have economic development or not, we got to be visionaries. We got to be leaders that think outside of the box. If we continue to have these liquor stores and these clubs that attract individuals that may not have the same views that we have, Albany have some challenges. And Mr. Mayor, if we don't get a hold on these liquor establishments and other incidents, that we will continue just playing the game. It is hurting and it's sad to see that in the south side and the east side, where you have your highest number of poverty in 31701 and 31705, until at time, I don't know what to tell constituents. Is the city safe or will it be safe? But you will see from these convenience stores that individuals may come in there and get some beer to go, and before they get across the street, they'll pop it up. And one I'm concerned about is in East Albany is the Little Caesar. Within 40 feet of the Little Caesar, there's a liquor store there. Little Caesar share the same parking lot with Lucky Sports Bar. And can you imagine seeing young kids come in and get a pizza? To the right, to the left, they see individuals staggering out a liquor store with a big bag of things that is not conducive. Mr. Mayor, based on your leadership, and you have been in the seat going almost 2 years, we got to do something to stop this bleeding in Albany, Georgia. It's a problem, and it's going to get worse. And we can hire many police we can, but what's coming out of some of these neighborhoods is frightening. And I honestly say that when I say frightened, that individuals that may visit this city saying, I'm not coming to Albany at night or in the day, because social media has already I get more calls from folks in Atlanta, know the news and all, before I get it, I'm here. So they said, you got to be crazy that we get it from Atlanta. But until we ask this commissioner, do what Commissioner Young and Sister Omni say, put a stop to these things until we go back and reinvent the wheel. Because if we don't, Albany will not be considered as a good life city. It'll be get your guns and get out of town. And we don't want that to happen. And not saying I'm an expert on it, but Mr. Mayor, if we don't look at doing something, as Commissioner said, forming a task force to look at this, and that's not the only thing in this community, until we get our heads out the sand and address some of these systemic problems that will not be resolved in the next 10 to 20 years. And one of them is an issue of poverty, that I don't care that the president has signed the tax credit for kids of nature, but we will have to get to these parents and their kids at an early age. And there's a cliche say, when they build a prison, they build them on individuals that are in the 3rd grade, because they have projected, once they finish school, that they will have a criminal record. And that's a sad commentator, but it's the truth. And I love Albany. I am a devout believer in East Albany. But Mr. Mayor, now is the time this commission and others take a look at the city and project where do we want to go in the next 10 to 15 years outside of the rim. I'm a firm believer. I do a lot of statistics behind the scene, and from campaign all the way down to crunches number. And if you ask me how Albany would look in the next 20 years, I would have to put a pause, say I hope that we'll be better as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Well, I just thank you for your time, and, you know, we've run across this before in the last few years, and I listened to your stats and, you know, talk about a task force, et cetera, and that's, you know, I would like to see some facts on it, and I'd like to see facts straight across the board. I'm very familiar with Mount Austin. I know what they're doing, and that's what they have asked. You know, the people got in before the commission, and they said, okay, let us show us, because if I sit here and I go in my mind and I think about, well, where have we had a shooting or a killing at a liquor store or at a grocery store, or, you know, it's hard for me to say, you know, to say that. I've got enough sense to know that if I have a shooting on Highland, they've bought that alcohol from somewhere. But I would like to see, you know, a couple of things I would like to see. You know, I'd like to see a hardcore fact, because I think that's what this commission is made to do, is to work off facts. And then I follow the Bob Woodson Institute very carefully, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, and I see what they're doing, getting down into the guts of these communities and trying to work with their mindset to try to stop these young folks at such a young age.
Yeah.
So again, thank you for your time, and I'd like to see, you know, almost the stats of everything that you've said.
Right, and the presentation, I can make sure, if you don't have a copy of, that has the hard copies of each study, you know, that's cited, we can definitely make sure that you get a physical copy of that.
Okay, have a great day.
Commissioner Warmington.
Yeah, a couple questions, Ms. Faruqi. Do you know the first time this issue was brought up to our Public Safety Committee meeting?
Yeah, I remember it was at the public safety meeting that I was at, which I couldn't tell you the exact date, but I know several people that were there. Commissioner Young, Commissioner Howard were there, you know, talked about the role of liquor, you know, in this. And I remember I specifically said to you also, you know, bringing a moratorium forward. It's something that in community meetings has definitely been brought up from people in the community as a suggestion. They wanted a full-blown moratorium, you know, a permanent pause. This would be temporary to explore that. But yeah, I can't remember the exact date of the public safety meeting that I was at that I remember being brought up.
It's been at least since April that we've talked about it.
Yeah.
So my question is, why do you need a moratorium to go work on alcohol? Why would you need why would you need to stop in order to go work on policy? Why can't you work on policy?
Because I
as we are
think
right
that
now?
if you are authorizing alcohol licenses, like this commission receives I think almost every meeting, like you just did, you know, in the last thing that you voted on. If you are forming a committee to actually explore, is this thing harmful? Do we need to be more intentional about it? As you're going on to authorize and approve these things that can be harmful, you know, you're working against the interests of the community. So until we create, you know, some sort of standard process for how we look at alcohol licenses, obviously we have the regulations of, you know, how far are they from a school or a church. But if we want to be more specific about making sure, you know, 1 per every 1,000 residents, what neighborhoods are they in, it doesn't make sense to me that you would make policy without actually stopping and studying the effects of that policy. And so that's why I think that, you know, it would make sense to pause on this so that you're not authorizing alcohol licenses that are harmful to the community that might come out in the task force.
So we've changed some alcohol policies, and we did that without a moratorium. My concern with the moratorium is, you know, I'm all for discussion, and but we've had multiple opportunities. Our public safety meeting has been on the agenda multiple times. Every time it comes up in our public safety, we're not ready. Let's move it to the next meeting. Let's move it to the next meeting. Now it moved into June. This was on our agenda in June, got kicked into July. Why haven't we been discussing the policy back in April, but we're going to penalize the citizens and business owners when we should have been talking about this months ago? I guess that's my concern.
Well, I guess
I'm all about discussing policy, but this the moratorium is what just, it's a struggle. And so when you look at our agenda that we just talked about, I mean, do you believe that we should deny Love's Truck Stops alcohol license?
No, but I think that we should have a policy as a city that looks at, you know, do truck stops automatically get alcohol licenses depending on how far they are from a residential neighborhood?
So you're saying that we couldn't deny Love's Truck Stop? We don't have the ability amongst the 7 of us to deny Love's Truck Stop?
But the license? Commission has not denied the majority of alcohol licenses. Yes.
We have that ability.
But will you? Because also, if my understanding is correct, I don't know who the leadership of the Public Safety Committee is, but if this was a priority for that Public Safety Task Force, it could have been handled in April. But my understanding is that, you know, it kept getting put off, like you said. So, you know, I think
I didn't put it off. Let me correct you. It's been on the agenda every single meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So we can talk about why it never. So let me ask you another couple questions. So you're telling me as a policymaker, we should only have 70 alcohol licenses in our city?
I'm saying that the CDC has offered that guideline for the public health of the community. And I think that this commission needs to ask itself, does it think that business owners have the inherent right to sell alcohol more than the right of residents in the city to live, you know, their life safely with, you know, like an actually good quality of life? And so I think it's a question of values for this commission. What do you value more? And if, you know, the city leaders on that task force really want to push, you know, that we really believe that alcohol is a right for business owners to sell, you know, more than the impacts of that on the people that actually live in these neighborhoods, then I think the city has the right to make that decision. But, you know, the people will see that.
Mm-hmm. So do you remember us denying an alcohol license on residents in East Albany? I don't know, 6 months ago or 9 months ago?
Yeah, I know there's been a few times that the city has denied it because residents came forward. But again, the burden on the residents to come forward and say, please don't continue flooding our community with this thing that we know is harmful, puts the burden on those residents when the city could just have a standard policy, which many cities across the country do. This is not, you know, something that cities have never created a policy around before. There's precedents in the state of Georgia and outside the state of Georgia.
Yeah, so I just disagree. Your statement about Beatty Road, I think, was unfair. I think we've demonstrated as a commission that whether it's on residents or South Albany, East Albany, North Albany, if it's in the middle of a neighborhood, we've had lots of conversations, and that particular example is an example I just asked you to go back and look at, that we did deny alcohol license that was right smack dab in the middle of a neighborhood, and that is on the record that we did that. The other thing, you made a statement that we have no discernment in approving. I had to disagree with that. I think we've also have demonstrated as a commission, and Mr. Davis continually gives us legal counsel, and there are methods and ways that we can deny alcohol license, and I think we've demonstrated that. So I never think that just because something's in front of us is a cookie cutter approved. So we certainly have that discretion and discernment at this board to do that. So anyway, that's it, Mayor. Thanks.
Commissioner Langstaff? Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ms. Faruqi, for all the work that you've done. 211 licenses. I think there's no more, because I just, I didn't know that until this meeting. If we're talking about a town of 77,000 people, and the CDC guidelines, recommend, or however it's put in that information, that we only have one alcohol outlet per 1,000 people. We're at 211 alcohol outlets, alcohol licenses in our community. What I think that points to is that we are very out of step with creating a stable community. We are out of step with community planning. We are out of step with trying to make Albany a better Albany. And, when we talk about policy, we're talking about decisions that are being made based on the guidelines. The guidelines that we have are not equitable. That's why I kept asking Inspector Norman over and over again, are we considering residential distance? That's not a consideration in our policy. We were literally going to put a liquor store, or it had been approved to put a liquor store literally across the street from Mr. Fred Works, who lives on Johnny Williams Road. It was going to be right across the street from his house. And we know that policy-wise, or we know that value-wise, that would not happen on Beatty Road. That would not even get considered on Beatty Road. That's why we have to have policy to create the same standards on one side of town that we have for the other side of town. So whether or not you get uncomfortable about it, or whether or not you feel like it's an unfair characterization, that's the reality. So when we're studying this, and when we're looking at this policy, we have to understand that policies, or the lack of policies, will always generate certain outcomes and realities in the community. That's why we need to stop. That's why we need to hold off. We just considered a whole slew, I think about 7 licenses. There will be more, because they know the businesses know we're talking about this. So they want to get theirs in, they want to get theirs approved before we can change something that may cause them not to be able to sell alcohol in our community. That's why we need to stop. We're at 211 licenses in a community of, or in a community that the CDC recommends that we only have about 70 licenses. So that's why we need to stop. We need to also talk about these alcohol license transfers. A lot of times these businesses just transfer something over to the next owner. And I'll admit, I have voted for alcohol licenses based on, their traditional location. I didn't want to, stop a business that was already there in a particular location. if it had already been operating in that light. But looking at these statistics, 211 licenses, when there's only recommended about 70 for our community our size. You know, I'll have to look at that. I applaud Commissioner Howard, who has staunchly, I don't know what his reasons are, has staunchly opposed these alcohol licenses over the year. Everybody knows what his views are on that. And there's evidently reasons and rationale for that based on research. This is why we need to stop. This is why we need to pause and take a look at what we're doing and what our decisions have meant for this community. There's always talk on the internet about where Albany is in terms of the worst place to live. There's always chatter about, you know, what a, you know, quote unquote hellhole this is to live in Agony, Georgia. We have to understand that as a board that our decisions drive those conditions on the ground. Our decisions create the reality for that. That's why we need to stop. That's why we need to take a pause, look at the policies so we don't continue to do that over and over again. And also thank you to Attorney Davis for drafting this ordinance. I think it's very reasonable. I would like to add the language about the committee that Ms. Faruqi talked about, because also I've talked to business owners as well. I know when we were doing the campaign against the liquor store, Mr. Milan Patel, who owns the brand new liquor store over on Westover Road, he had some cause for concern when that liquor store was going to be placed on ML King, and told me so. So, you know, there's a better way to do this. There are standards that we can implement for these stores. And you know, I appreciate any time we can set a standard for the community. As Mr. Warburton said, if you know, we look at it and say that this alcohol outlet doesn't belong in the middle of the block on residents, I'm good with that. And I think that decision was a great one, because I have gotten information that that spot was absolutely horrible, absolutely, you know, a travesty from the owner of the building, who rented to that woman who actually opened up that business. So, you know, when we can do that, but do it on a systematic basis and do it with some rationale that creates kind of the equitable situation on the ground, then that's what we need to do. So again, I'll ask that, you know, if Attorney Davis, if we can add that language about the committee back to it, that would be great. And I'll also say this in terms of, if you want to put it on me for not bringing this to the forefront, I wanted to make sure we got the information correct. I wanted to make sure we got the statistics, because when we're creating these justifications for things, we all know how we just kind of sit up here and, you know, kind of use our own mind to create, you know, whatever justifications for what we want to do on this board. There is research. There's a pile of research about alcohol density. There's a pile of research about the effects of alcohol outlets on poor, disadvantaged minority communities. And we need to take some time to do that. It doesn't matter when we do it. Could have done it in April, could have done it in May, could have done it in June, could have done it in July, or we can do it in July, to stop and take a pause and see actually what we can do as a commission to cure this situation. So that's where we are, and I hope that this board will see that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. Ms. Freaky, thank you for putting this together, but I do want to make some observations. Back when talking about the cities, it had Moultrie and Cleveland, Georgia. Those were issues of there being inconsistencies between the city ordinance and the state law. We don't have that problem here. I think, isn't it true, Mr. Davis, a city can implement more stringent measures?
Yes.
Okay, but there are state laws that set aside minimum distances between churches and schools. And I think you would find, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Davis, but I think the city of Albany has a maximum number of licenses for each ward, isn't that correct?
Yes, based on census data.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
so I mean, that's a restriction we have that's not required by state law. Is there, so, I mean, and also, one thing you need to remember is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Carter, the highest number of alcohol licenses is in Ward 5. I think that, is it?
That's correct.
Is it, is that, so, I mean, I don't deny that alcohol density in neighborhoods where a large number of people live at or below the poverty level is an issue. I don't think we need a moratorium. And a committee to show how we can improve our ordinances, I think that would be a positive step. Now, let me say, I don't think we need to have people serve on this committee or exclusively serve on this committee who share the same, have the same understanding of this issue as you do. Because, I mean, if we said, are these new voting law, Georgia's new voting law is fair, and we put 8 members of the state house who are Republicans on the committee, they're going to come out and they're going to say yes. And to the contrary, if we had 8 members who are Democrats, they're going to say no. We need a cross section. And what I mean is, maybe somebody from the chamber, the business community. I don't think the restaurants have an organization anymore, but we are affecting, if you say we had this moratorium and you said there's no cons. I mean, I was just thinking this was on the agenda last month, I believe. The cons are these new businesses wouldn't get a liquor license. People wouldn't work. The city, some revenue from licenses, but the revenue from the sales, all those are positive things to the city. And you made your opinion known, and I appreciate it. You got to make a decision. Do you support every person's right to sell alcohol, or are you going to protect your citizens? I mean, I don't really see it as a either-or situation as you presented it, but there are some disadvantages to a moratorium, and I just don't think we need a moratorium. I mean, Mr. Norman said we hover about 211. What that confirms is that every month we have businesses and restaurants who are going out of business. Mm-hmm. You know, so I mean, it's not just a mounting number here. And so what I am saying is that I would not support a moratorium, but on the other hand, I think this is a good idea. We need to have, we need to review our ordinances and look at what we can do equitably to address the issue of alcohol density. Because, I mean, if we go back and we look at, I mean, Commissioner Howard had mentioned this concern about a liquor store or bar being next door to Little Caesars. Well, I mean, it's just a reality. What children are exposed to, in music, in culture, in movies, social media. I mean, let's don't say it's all alcohol that's ruining our society. And I mean, that's just not accurate, but it's a problem. There's no question. Only a fool would say alcohol is not a big factor in violence and crime, and to some degree poverty and the breakup of families. So let's get a committee together. Let's see what other communities are doing, and let's have an ordinance. I've always felt that way. It's just fair across the board. And I don't think we need a moratorium to do it, but Mr. Carter, if, I mean, we certainly vote on this, and that's the right of the commissioner who's proposing it, but it's not an either-or situation here. I think if we could get some proposals of how we could look at other ordinances, model ordinances, and go forward, that's what my position will be on it, Mr. Carter.
And I guess I'll just respond to that, Mayor, by saying, no one is saying that alcohol is the sole, responsible, force for crime and violence in Albany. It's a pillar, like there are other pillars. And so that's why I think it's important, to have that body that studies specifically alcohol density in Albany, because like you said, Ward 5 has the highest number. A lot of those are probably the restaurants, I would think, and facilities for whom, alcohol is on site. And that would be something to break down, the difference between those poorer neighborhoods and how alcohol density plays out there. But in terms of this committee, I do think you're not going to find someone that doesn't have views already on this, and I would be open to this committee also having people on it that feel that a moratorium would be bad or that more regulation would be bad, as long as we also have residents who are represented, who know their communities, who have been dealing with this, and they're the ones that are really, being heard from and led by, and definitely members of the NAACP, as a body that is active in the community. But to your point about, I understand that the committee, that's the reason why I think it would be good, because we need that kind of research and interrogation, but a moratorium would allow that space without the problem to be continuing. Because even though, yes, this body has voted against liquor licenses in residential neighborhoods, that is because this body made that decision, not because there was already a policy that vetted certain things from coming to the table. Yeah, and that's what I think we need.
Okay. Well, what I'm saying is, I think you would find the city of Albany probably has more restrictions than a lot of other cities, some of which I mentioned, one being the maximum number of licenses in the ward. But we can look at it, and I would ask Mr. Carter, but I'm telling you, Ms. Frugen, not asking a question, I'm not going to support a moratorium. But on the other hand, this idea of a committee and looking at other ordinances and getting together the scholarly research is a good idea. And when I said that, I didn't mean you would be ineligible to be on the committee, but I don't think we need 6 people who share the same opinion, because we know what the result's going to be. And so, but we thank you for your presentation.
Mayor, can I say something?
I guess we'll go around and get Commissioner Howard.
No further comment on that issue.
Yeah. Mayor Pro Tem.
One thing I might point out real quick, Commissioner Young mentioned the new liquor store on Westover Boulevard. Directly behind that are the Point North apartments. So also, we run into, even though that's in Northwest Albany, we still have apartments directly behind that new liquor store. Thank you.
Well, what I'd like to say, I think what I'm picking up, and I've been picking up, is that it seems like it's alcohol that y'all are, that people, that keeps coming to the table, but it's in the conversation today, it seems like maybe you're trying to focus on other issues that could be pulling down these neighborhoods. And in doing my research, I was amazed at how much literature was out here about lottery tickets and marijuana and the damage that it's doing to people that, the poorer neighborhoods. So if we're going to look at what's causing so much chaos and so much, a committee would be great, but I would love to also throw lottery tickets and marijuana in there, because it seems like there's tons of literature on what it's doing. Okay? Thank you.
Commissioner Warburton.
So I'm just sitting here scanning the CDC, very, very good information. I think it's unfair. I couldn't find the 1 license per 1,000. They may be in here somewhere. But, it talks about in this report, which I agree, this is stuff we ought to consider. There's population-based criteria, and I guess your 1 out of 1,000 is population-based. But it actually gives reason why that's not a good criteria. Then it talks about area-based criteria. That would be based on the area. Then it talked about roadway denial. So, I just feel if we're coming at this we've already got the solution in mind, then why do we need a committee? When this report is a very, very good report, very good things to consider. Again, it is CDC. They're health focused. Then you got to bring in law enforcement. As Commissioner Fletcher said, zoning is a big issue. So, CDC is not the end all be all. Certainly they've got some evidence-based data that they're saying here. So I don't know where the 70 licenses came from. I mean, certainly if you take one paragraph out of this 330-page document, then yeah, you can say 70. But so I think, like the mayor, I don't support a moratorium. I think to come in and just say all alcohol licenses are evil and we're going to stop it, I think that's wrong. But I think if we want to consider policy, consider new ways of evaluating zoning, alcohol, also, you know, lottery, extended stay hotels. I mean, we could go on and on and on about the things that's negatively affecting our community, but to have a narrow focus just on alcohol licenses, I think is you're just focusing on one thing. I think it's definitely a much broader conversation. So, you know, I do support conversations. I support a committee. I just wouldn't support a moratorium, even with the 5 or 6 alcohol licenses that are in front of us right now. I think that would be a more detriment to our community to deny those that are in front of us under a moratorium than if we look at them individually while we're working on this new committee or new policy that we're wanting to talk about. So that's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. Well, I just say let's not get, I guess, sidetracked in the straw man arguments. Nobody said alcohol licenses were evil or that we were going to stop everybody from pursuing alcohol licenses. What we're talking about is exactly what everybody's been saying. Take some time to study the issue so we don't continue down a road of making these decisions without the information that's readily available. We just, you know, went around the horn and talked about how much information is available. We just went around the horn and discussed the data. Those are the discussions that we can have when we have a moment to, or take a moment to actually look at these things. Again, if you want to, you know, debate the statistics or talk about the statistics, that's what we need to take time and do. But as we're doing that, you know, we'll still be just kind of moving through these alcohol licenses with no really, you know, with you know, the current policy, which I think, I don't think does enough to consider the effects that it has on the community. So if, you know, if you believe that it's an issue or could be an issue, then why not take a moment? Nobody's saying to deny these licenses. The licenses that we came up with today, we'll have to vote on them in a week. What we're saying is, let's pause so we can look at the issue, see what changes we need to make. That's what's being proposed here. Not stopping people from doing business, not stopping applications from being accepted by Mr. Norman, but to stop and look at our policy and what we're doing as a board in terms of making these decisions. And I think, yes, we do need to stop and have this moratorium because it's obvious that everybody's, you know, interested in the data, interested in making their point. I think there are all kinds of perspectives, Mr. Mayor, that need to be represented, not just business owners, not just the chamber. It needs to be community. It needs to be faith-based. It needs to be people who all have an interest in this community. I know this board is, you know, business heavy, but that cannot be the only decision when we're making these things. I think it hurts the community when we, you know, put the interests of business owners over the effects that doing business has on the community. That's my view. So if we took time, made a committee that represents all interests, I think that's in the largest interest of the city of Albany and our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I think also, Mr. Davis, I mean, when we talk about the city, we'll get all this information. We need it. But does the city still have the ordinance that there has to be a minimum distance between another establishment that sells as an on premises?
Yes, as regarding bars, they do.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know I've seen some of the research. I'm not as familiar. Ms. Farouk has cited several articles, some scholarly, but that is a real issue. When bars are contiguous to each other, there tends to be an outflow, and especially like you see in college towns, and that causes some kind of altercation. That is another example of the city still has on the books a requirement that's beyond what is there in state law. So I think we're going to find, and not to say that we can't do better, but I would suggest, Mr. Carter, if you could give us some ideas. Obviously, this committee, maybe every commissioner appoint one person to the committee who's willing to serve, and Mr. Davis over time can give us ordinances from other cities. We can look at it, and the committee can come back to us.
Yes, I'd be glad to, but in your qualifications section, paragraph 9, you already have the power to take into consideration the effect on a neighborhood.
Yeah, I understand that, Mr. Davis, but I mean, I think, and it's a legitimate argument that Commissioner Young and Ms. Farouk are making, that somewhat arbitrary, that latitude. And if we can find some cities that say you got to be, the state law, whatever, if there's a requirement for residences or not a requirement, maybe we can impose a requirement, and then that would address that to some issue. But then, of course, you're going to have the problem of the establishments that are in, grandfathered in, and
Right.
we'll have to address all that, because it's a much bigger issue than waving a magic wand, I think.
We will poll the commission, get an idea of who you want to appoint to that committee, and then we'll try and pull that committee together and start having put some things together for you.
Not to necessarily disagree with you, Mr. Carter, but I think first we need to understand what the charge of the committee would be, what the remit of the committee would be, so that if we ask somebody to serve, they have an idea of what the objective is.
I agree.
Is that fine?
I agree.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Root. You have a good day.
Thank you, you too.
We move into public administration and finance. The next item is a recommendation to enter into an agreement with Upchurch Fence, Inc. of Jenkinsburg, Georgia, to install a fence for a fire department location at a cost of $83,187. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioner. Mike Trotter. I'm standing in for Mr. Fields this
morning. Good morning, Mr. Trotter.
This is a replacement fence for the Albany Fire Department Training Center that was damaged back in 2017 by the tornado. The bids was advertised. 9 vendors was directly solicited for submitting bid. Staff is recommending contract with Upfence for a total expenditure of $83,187, and contract period time is 30 days after notice of receipt.
Thank you, Mr. Trotter. Mr. Burns, you want to say anything about this?
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. The fence is important to the Albany Fire Department for the simple fact of with the close proximity with the school, we are worried about the kids coming over to our property and utilizing that pond. And during this storm, after this happened in the storm of January 22nd, 2017, although we had a lot of damage at that facility, all of the buildings have been repaired, but nothing has been done with the fencing. So the fencing is very important to this department.
Okay. Questions? Mr. Howard?
No question.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No questions.
Commissioner Worthington?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
No questions.
I see there's also a holding pond in the
Yes, sir. We do our training, our boat training there. We do our facility training,
Okay.
and we do what we call drafting there, where we draft water from the pond to make sure it flows through the trucks properly.
Okay. I see later on we talk about the underwater rescue. So is that where you train?
No, sir.
Not, okay.
We actually go to the Flint River to do that training.
Okay. And what's the funding source for this? Mr. Trotter, you know that?
I believe it was risk management and insurance claim.
Okay. So this is a FEMA payment, Mr. Carter, you know? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Trotter. Thank you, Chief. Next item on the agenda is consider a contract with LRA Constructors. Mr. Wright has signed up. Mr. Trotter, can we let Mr. Wright?
Yes, sir.
Greetings on the Albany multimodal. We pointed out the issues that are still present. First of all, we submitted to former Mayor Hubbard, and for your information, this project been meandering around for 21 years. The point here is that there's no rush. One thing that occurred is we waited 12 years for the American Indian. And we do not need to rush now because we do not think that you're meeting the requirements of the federal government. And we have to be upfront with you about this. Back in 2018, we submitted a 47-page document to then Secretary Lane Child to stop the project. We did the same thing when incoming Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg came in, the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana. And they still had us, that is, all of the administrators for FTA, FAA, and FHWA. This is a proposed construction of a multimodal 21 years later for various reasons, but the main thing is we gave you a template by the National Corporate Highway Trust Fund back in 2018 to show you how to meet the DB requirements. In new construction, your consultant gave you 6 NACOs. The same thing with the cargo, what you call the hangar at the airport. Both of these are new facilities. So that means that you would have far more DB participation because you're dealing with 20 NACOs as opposed to 6. We went back and checked all the way back to 2000 and saw how we had been failing to meet the DB goal because of these kind of mistakes. So the thing I just wanted to let you know is that if we cannot reach some kind of agreement on this, we'll have to ask the federal judiciary to look at it and see what they say. That is not a guarantee. That's just what we looked at. On page 1 there, we point out some of the things with the NACO. And we are suggesting that between now and the Labor Day holiday, the last transportation center was really a great trailway station, and it lasted 50 years. And that's about the age of US DOT, for your information, when it was split into 3 silos as opposed to a sundry of organizations. We calculated DB goal should have been 70% as opposed to the 11% that your unnamed consultant, but we know it's somebody out of New York or New Mexico who may be sitting in a palace and then telling us that you ought to be satisfied, and we're not. So we pointed out that on page 2, you'll look how we calculate the 70% based on the fact that you would have 16 NACOs. In other words, everything conceivable in new construction would be involved in a project like this as opposed to a taxiway at the cargo apron or doing a road down Slafford Boulevard. So that means you would have more DB opportunities. That is, you should if you knew what you were doing. Now, the difference between the cargo hangar and this one, both of them are new buildings. So you would have about 70% on either one of them. It would be about 70%. And you come up with 10. We calculate 70. So if we have to ask the judiciary to look at this, so be it. Now, we will still be professional about it, but you're the one created it in your corner to meet. On page 2, we point out some other things. How in the world can you end up with 2 DBs 90 days ago, then you come back 1,000% later and you got 19. That means they were there all the time. So every time we do this, we deny opportunities for this community to grow. We've lost 12,000 citizens between the city and the county since 2010, and it's because of things like that. That's why so much poverty in the black community, because on average, about $20 million come from DOT to do projects every year, not some year, every year.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Any questions for Mr. Wright? Mr. Howard?
Good morning, Mr. Wright. How you do?
Just great, just great.
Mr. Wright, let me ask you a question, and maybe you can help me find it from U.S. Census data. Is that you see in your handout, you say from 2010 to 2020,
Right.
that Albany and Dougherty County have lost what? You said a population of 12,000?
Right. That was according to, and we gave you that report. This is part of the report on the request by Outdoor Network. We got that same study in here. That was what the Wall Street Journal did on us. And they determined by looking at the United States Census Bureau, ACS, which is the annual survey that the Census Bureau in communities all across the United States. And according to Dr. Daniel McIntyre from Harvard University, he indicated that we were number 5 in the nation for being the fastest shrinking cities because of those kind of things. But the point there is he indicated that according to the information he gathered from the Bureau of Census, that we were 72,000 citizens, as opposed to a higher number. And the same is attributable to the Dougherty County, where they lost the same amount. So we actually lost 12,000 between the city and the county because of that. But that's what the results of that is. That was the study that the Wall Street Journal did when they looked at the 25 fastest shrinking cities, such as looking at Jackson, Shreveport, Charleston. All of them are in that report, and when we get to the grant request by the EDC, that same report is in there because it means that we have either been misled or lied to, or people did not know what they were doing. And that was a movie Commissioner Howard, the mayor and commissioner, back in 1995 called Clueless, C-L-U-E-L-E-S-S. I think the superstar who did that was Taylor Swift or Britney Spears or somebody, but anyway, that's what we have when we look at the information that's being presented today, that you got all these unnamed people and there's no justification. It's contrary to everything that's in 49 CFR 26, 49 CFR subpart 23, because both of them are applicable and deal with the funding that you have. But that's where that number come from the survey. And it's in your handout on page 89 from what the EDC is requesting, but all the data is there. You have the other 24 cities, and we are 5th in the nation, according to them. That means that when you look at the metrics that was used, such as unemployment, poverty, losing everything, they looked at Cooper Tire Company and why we lost those because of organizations like the EDC that come and say we were going to do this, and then they fail. And we continue to dole out money. That's why we have so much poverty. But that's where that number comes from.
Mr. Mayor, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Since LRA is going to get this contract and where they solicit 16 DBE, before we vote on this next Wednesday, can you ask procurement to give us a list of those 16 DBE that will participate in this?
Could we get that, Commissioner Howard? Would anybody else request that information? Commissioner Young, okay, could we get that, Commissioner Howard and Commissioner Young? Anybody else?
Well, I think if you provide all of us.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
what
Charlie,
we'll
would
do.
you send it out to the Mayor and Board of Commissioners?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Nothing else.
Commissioner Warrington?
Nothing else.
Commissioner Young?
No, thank you, Mr. Wright.
Mr. Wright, okay. Next, Mr. Trotter, Mr. Hamilton, and I think Mr. Love from Niles Bolton is on the, is he available, Mr. Hamilton? You don't think he's on the line? Okay.
Yes, so consider approval of the contract
Commissioner Howard, any questions?
Mr. Hammond, let me ask you a question. This year, when you said it was only one bidder on the transit station, not rejected, but
that's when we have, first time we took it out for a bid, we have only got one proposal in, and it was recommended from the Georgia Department of Transportation that we go out again, just to put in a good faith effort to see if we could solicit some more proposals, and we got one additional.
okay. So this the person in the past did not rebid?
Yes, that was LRA, was the only proposal the first time.
Okay. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, sir. If approved, when would construction commence?
Go back to the Georgia Department of Transportation, as in my note there about seeking additional funding to cover the shortfall. And then we will have to schedule pre-construction meetings with the contractor, and at that time a revised schedule will be provided.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Mr. Fletcher?
Nothing further.
It says GDOT is looking for grant funding. What are we
Yeah.
sure? Are they going to be able to get additional funding? Or
Yes,
where's
sir.
this
Yes,
$2
sir.
million going to come from?
They
So when I look at the money here, I guess we purchased the land that the city provided 100% of the funding to buy the land.
Right.
Okay. So if you take that million and then the SPLOST 7 and local grant match, as it stands, was that about 2.1, 2.2 million?
Right.
Am I doing the math right? Okay. So my concern with moving forward is we've got 2 million out here that's needed. Is there a scenario where we're going to have to cough up another 2 million? Or are you confident that we're going to find that other 2 million from some
I'm confident.
That's it, Mayor.
Commissioner Young?
Yes, sir. The only starting off with this, is this going to be in concert with the revitalization of Harlem, or is this just going to be a separate start to this project?
Yeah.
All right. Mr. City Manager, do we have any update on the, I guess, start of the planned Harlem revitalization?
We don't. We just recently.
That was planned, so I just want to make sure we're, staying on that trajectory.
Right.
With the rest of that development as well. And I don't know, maybe I'll mention that in new business, but I did want to ask you a question about the, what we talked about before with the bus stops and
Okay.
kind of stepping up with that, but I'll mention that in new business.
Thank you. When you're the supplicant, you can't.
If you guys elect to move forward without having received officially receiving the additional dollars, this is a reimbursement process. So meaning that the city will pay up front anyway, regardless, and get a reimbursement along the way during the process. So with that being said, the contracts may, if you elect to go ahead and proceed, then we can do that and then just get reimbursed in the future.
Okay, well,
Yes, sir. There are several funding sources, grant funding sources, besides the one where Mr. Hamlin has talked about that could participate in this. Can't tell you we're going to have the money in 60 days, but we can have an answer as far as whether or not we'll be funded within 60 days.
Okay.
And if we're not funding in that time frame, we'll bring back an alternate funding source for you. So
Okay.
this will be taken care of.
okay, all right.
Is it?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Maples, Mr. Hughes. Yes, sir.
This bid was advertised in the Herald, local channel, and Georgia Procurement Registry. 5 vendors was directly solicited. 4 vendors submitted bid. Jim Board Construction was the lowest responsibility. Staff recommends adopting utility board contract recommendation with Jim Board for $1,069,232.
Mr. Maples, Mr. Hughes.
Yes, sir. Good morning. We would just like to point out that this project has been in the works. It was originally set up back in the early 90s. It didn't get approval and didn't get to move forward because the railroad blocked it. They said we couldn't get a permit from them. They wouldn't allow a permit to go in Broad Avenue, which we have to put the storm drains in. We've been working hard on this. We had established a good relationship with Omnitrax in Georgia and Florida. A few years ago, we went to them and we asked them again to reconsider, and they said they were amenable to the thought. and we've gone through the permitting process, and this will complete the separation of the storm drainage from the sanitary sewer on the east side. So,
Ms. Hughes, do you have anything to add?
no, sir, just if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Howard, any questions for the presenters?
Bruce, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you give me sort of
Outline of it, but basically if you go around Plum Street and Clark Avenue up near Shackelford Park, it's that area. Then you've got up around Coates and Clark on the Hobson Street side. You've got Clark Avenue just south of Coates and Clark's, around Dewey, Hobson, Atkins, and those streets. And then you've got the area down around East Broad, going from just east of the underpass and going all the way over to was it Dewey Street?
just send me the map? Because
Mr. Fletcher?
No questions.
Mr. Warmington?
Yeah, Mr. Maple, so I'm trying to remember when this was presented to us as the overall, big CSO separation, but it seemed like this is going to accomplish a good amount of volume, I guess.
It's about 40 acres on the east side of stormwater will be taken off the sanitary sewer.
How many?
About 40 acres.
Wow. So when I look at our $100 million price tag, and this is $1 million, this is going to take care of a pretty good amount.
On the east side, yes, sir. Yeah.
So I guess we have one CSO on the east side.
This is the last of it right here.
So this will be the last. So
which frees up, gives you capacity. It takes storm drainage off of lift station 26, which is the pump station right there at Albany State University, which takes it off of the force main that goes down under Oak Ridge and goes to Washington Street, and then it takes capacity off the wastewater treatment plant. So it's going to help the system. Yes, sir.
I mean, in my opinion, this is a huge project. I mean, and we were just waiting on the railroad. It
is a huge project. Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's nice to finally say we're going to get it accomplished. So.
Yeah. Okay. Good deal. That's it, Mayor. Thanks.
Chris Young.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Maples. And I guess what was the deal with the railroad? Why did they?
They own, when you go at the underpass, that's their right of way. We have part of East Broad Avenue is in their right of way, so you have to get their permission. Why back in 1990 they were so opposed to it, I do not know. But they were very adamant. I remember when Mr. Hughes and I were there, we had the plans drawn up. We asked for their permission to get a permit from them and to put the storm drains in there. And I may be paraphrasing, but it seemed like they said it was not only no, but hell no, you're not going to get it. So, but it's got a different ownership, different people, and that's why we revisited it with them. We've got a good relationship with them. We asked them about it, and they said, we'll run it up the ladder, and we'll definitely consider it. And this group of people came back and said, we don't see why we would be opposed to it, and that's why we're here today. So.
Okay, and kind of, do we have an idea what the disruption will be to railroad, to residents?
There will be no disruption to the railroad.
Okay.
It's just in their right of way.
Gotcha. So. All right. And I'm trying to find it. What's the funding source for this?
SPLOST 7.
SPLOST 7, okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Young. Next item is a opportunity to approve a application for a Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. Mr. Smith, how you doing?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning, Chief.
Mayor. Albany Police Department is requesting City Commission approval to make application for the 2021 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant in the amount of $83,805. If awarded and in accordance with the City of Albany, Dougherty County Standing Memorandum of Understanding, the amount will be divided using an 80-20% split between the respective parties, with the City of Albany requiring $67,044 and Dougherty County requiring $16,761. Primary use for this formula grant has been federally mandated to be used for law enforcement's programs related to equipment, technology upgrades, and/or purchases. Albany Police Department will use the awarded funds for the purpose of officer safety, youth engagement, and training and development programs. Deadline is August 8th, 2021.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Chief?
No question, Chief.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Mr. Fletcher?
No questions.
Mr. Warmington?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
I was just going to ask real quick, Chief, tell me again exactly where this money is going to be put to?
We already doing a cognitive youth engagement program where selected individuals are actually going to a licensed psychologist, and this is some kids who may be at risk, and they, before anything happens, they go talk with, again, this licensed person, and so that's one of the aspects of it. Then some officer safety issues. There's some new, less lethal stuff that is out on the market right now that we're trying to go to give officers other options. And then training and development programs with our CALEA and certification, trying to get that education and training out there so we can maintain that federal accreditation.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Much. Thank you. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is consideration to approve a application for a grant from, is it the Emergency Management Performance Grant Program? Is that what EMPG stands for? Oh, I'm sorry.
Firehouse sub grant.
Oh, this is the request to authorize staff to apply for a grant to purchase dive equipment.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Chief.
Okay. Albany Fire Department would like to receive approval to apply for the Firehouse Sub Grant. The Firehouse Sub Grant is a privately funded and competitive grant opportunity that is provided by Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. This grant does not require matching funds and cannot exceed $50,000. The grant application requires departmental financial information, a vendor quote, equipment inventory list, background and history, narrative, and other general information. The application portal closes on August 18th, 2021 at 5 p.m. or when they receive a maximum of 600 applications. Now, with this grant, we want to upgrade our dive team equipment. Our dive team was formed in 2013, and some of the equipment we need, not limited to, but wetsuits, flip fins, flashlights, face masks, ropes, hooks, drags, and oxygen tanks.
Commissioner Howard, any questions for Chief Byrne?
No question for Chief.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Mr. Fletcher?
No questions.
Mr. Warmington?
No questions.
Ms. Young?
Just one question. How many dive teams do we have in our area? Because I know there's like a volunteer.
Well, the ones we work with the most is Lee County and Valdosta. I mean, I have to get you a number. I'm not sure a minute dive team. Albany Fire Department has one. I know Lee County has a dive team. And we work with Valdosta too. So those are three I know of.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, I guess every time they ask you to round it up at Firehouse Subs, they're really using that money for something positive. So, thank you.
Okay.
And next is a request to authorize staff to apply for funding through the Emergency Management Performance Grant Program. Is that right?
To accept.
Accept, okay.
Okay, on June 7th, the Albany Fire Department, we were awarded the EMPG grant to support emergency management salary in the amount of $28,820. In our application, we requested $27,931.28. We would like to accept this grant and deposit the funds, as well as return the difference of $888.44.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any questions? Ms. Howard?
No question.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No questions.
Ms. Fletcher?
No questions.
Ms. Warmington?
You said you're returning
800.
$888.44. That's the difference from what we requested and what was actually sent.
Okay, I won't ask the obvious question, but I mean, did we apply for 28.8 or we applied for 27.9?
We applied for 20. I think I'm not 100% sure that I find that answer out for you. Okay. Lauren McGrath, who's out sick today, she did the application and she knows that answer. But I'll be sure to get you an answer.
I mean, it requires a 50% match, so we're
the total amount for the project, sir, is $55,862.56.
okay. So we might be bound by that 50% unless we put more money
Yes,
with
sir.
it to keep the 800.
That would sound like.
Put an 800 to keep 800 or something like that. Okay.
That could be my fee for carrying the flag.
You would be shortchanged.
Ms. Young?
No questions.
All right, thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a request for funding in the amount of $400,000 from the Job Investment Fund to be utilized at the Outdoor Network Project, the old McGregor Building. Hold on, Mr. Brand. Mr. Wright wanted to speak to this? Yes. Okay.
Mayor and Commissioners, your presenter worked on drafting the metrics or the guidelines for the Economic Development Commission back in 2014. Others, but this application, for all practical purposes, is a joke. The reason for that is that the money was supposed to help mitigate a cost increase to the city, first of all, when that did not happen like it did in Atlanta, New York, and other places. Then the Municipal Electric Authority of Georgia said they were going to give us the money back in credit. It was supposed to be $100 million. Well, but it was placed in trust, and trust is just that. A trust is when a third party is supposed to look out for your interests. So public money is means tested, and that simply indicates that you have to be very cautious about using it. The applicant has not met any requirements. In accounting, you have some. You can ask Mr. Derek Brown or any commissioner up here, the city manager. You can go into any bank in the world and go in there and tell them, we are going to. That's future. The program was set based on 90% or higher of accomplishment. So if you could go in the bank and say, well, we're going to, in the year 2025, do blase, 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 see how much credit that bank will give you. That's what Outdoor Network, everyone take us for fools. And to some degree, maybe we are, but the application was based on, when we wrote the metric, the first metric was the applicant had to complete 90%, so it was realistically assured that it was going to occur, not future, but reimbursable looking back at the track record of the past. In accounting, you have something called GAAP, G-A-A-P. Generally accepted accounting principles indicate that even when you try to do a lease, it has to be based on achieving 90% of what has happened. ask your inspection department, before they will give a certificate of occupancy, it has to be 90% complete. If you, for whatever reason, if the federal government allow you to build that transportation center, before you can get clearance on it, 90% of the objectives in the contract must be completed. It is not future-oriented. It is looking at the past and meeting thresholds. Outdoor Network is a foreign corporation because we pulled their rap sheet, and they're actually in Hollywood, Florida. You need to look at that. We went and pulled the whole thing up from the Secretary of State. So people take us for fools and love to play rope-a-dope with us. Now, we point that out to you. Commissioner Howell had asked about certain metrics. Look on page 7. It shows the information from Douglas McIntyre from the Wall Street Journal about the 10 fast-shrinking cities in America and where we rank number 5. You look on the lower left of page 7, that is pointed out the data period covered. Look on page 8. It shows you them. We look at page 10. That's where you see the city of Albany, Georgia. 72,000. Dougherty County lost a similar amount. If the EDC and other organizations were doing what they're supposed to do, the city of Albany was doing what it was supposed to do, we wouldn't be losing 12,000 people and still spending $300 million. We went and checked the school board budget. They got 13,000 students. That budget is $330 million.
Presentation from Ms. Jana Dyke, because I believe she knows the facts.
Ms. Dyke
on-
with us? Okay, yes, that's next, but I thought.
Okay, I mean, I was just making sure, because some of what he's saying and what I've studied up on was different. So, okay, thank you. Nothing to you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Warmington?
No questions.
Commissioner Young?
I remember you telling me about this particular formula, Mr. Wright. Again, and then maybe it just I have it kind of slowed down, but I would like to get it to kind of do the analysis on just how this money has been used that came back from MEAG and what we're getting out of it, even, you know, in places like we're investing in the new grocery store and, you know, just how that, you know, what is the bang for the buck, so to speak, when we're investing that type of money that's actually going into our community. But thank you for your comments. Thank you, sir.
Okay, one thing that needs to be explained here, Mayor, again, you all do what you want to do, but one of the things that is applicable and that we often miss is simply this. When you look at all the analysis about ECG and everything, when people give you too much of how great something is, you have to wonder. That's speculation at the very maximum. But there are two standards that you must always use. It has to be based on objective data. One of the things that we do when in accounting and general national accounting and economics and finance is you use what is called NPV. That is the alphabet N, right after M, P before Q, and then Z. What that means is net present value. You take what money that someone is putting in this particular case, EDC and Outdoor Network, a Florida-based company, not putting anything in it. They're telling you, give us $400,000 on what we might do. Net present value tell you have to look at what you're putting in it and how soon you're going to get a return on it if someone putting something in this. In this case, they're talking, suggesting to you that if we have a perfect storm, nothing goes wrong, no pandemic, that in 2 or 3 years, we're going to invest $20 million. We are going to in the future. Okay. It's just like going.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Well, listen. This is just a point of order, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Now, you talk about other things. I remember 4 months ago, Bo Henry came down here and you all talked about liquor for an hour and 15 minutes. And then when we get up here, it is get lost. Now, you do what you want to do, but the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and you have to sign every contract you sign from the federal government indicate you must not discriminate. Now think about it, and as I said, we'll see what happens.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mr. Brown, Ms. Dyke.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager. I'm basically introducing Ms. Dykes this morning, but the issue before you is to consider approving a $400,000 grant from the Job Investment Fund as requested by the EDC and as has been recommended by the Long-Term Financial Planning Committee. So she has all of the details, and I'll defer all the questions to her, but she can give you a lot more details than I can.
Ms. Dyke?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. How are you today? On behalf of the EDC, sorry, my mask is caught in my earring. On behalf of the EDC, I'm here to request the funding from the job investment funds, which were outlined when Mayor Adams was in-house, and with the intention of having these monies to allow us to be competitive. Economic development is something that is truly a competitive market, and we at the EDC have worked to ensure that we are doing what's best for our community, as well as maintaining that competitive advantage. In a time when communities often give tax abatements fully for 20 years, we have advocated for one where the company will be paying us. During the construction phase, you've got 4 years that they will not pay tax dollars on the industry that's going into place. However, after year 4, you will start seeing that taxation of the property coming into play. They have a total capital investment that they have committed to both with our community as well as the state through formal MOUs that outline 92 jobs will be created with this project and a capital investment of $22 million. They have exceeded the monies as well as the job creation that they have committed to. So we are excited about that commitment. I think anyone can agree that the area that they're going in is one we've all identified as a blighted area. I remember growing up, that facility was great. McGregor was a great building. It was thriving. My mother worked there when I was a child. As I grew up, that building became blighted. It became one that was an eyesore in our community. They are taking what has been a blighted facility and are making an investment in an area that we have all identified as needed. The jobs that are tied in, sorry guys, I've turned 41 and I all of a sudden forgot how to read small print, but the jobs that are being created at this project, you've got 50 jobs that are going to be tied into the call center. Those salaries are going to be $32,000 annually, which exceeds the average minimum wage, minimum salary in our community. And then you also have the manufacturing jobs that are going to be $50,000 a year, which allow the residents that are in South Albany to better themselves because this is a great access point for them. To kind of circle back on this investment and everything, this project is one that is multi-layered. This company is invested in our area. They came here. We were competing with Florida for them to go back to Florida. And so we had to position ourselves in a way that we could secure this project. Through that, it is, like I said, multi-layered. But in a time where many businesses suffered, this business thrived. They have the number one OEM parts website. That is going to be run out of our community. That tax money will be coming back to our community in sales. They had a 300% increase in profits during the pandemic since 2019. They took out 2 revenue bonds with the PDA. That is one in the amount of $8 million, the second in the amount of $13 million. And I'm leaving some of the hundreds of thousands off in there, just kind of giving you a round number there. This company is required to meet these thresholds within 3 years as per the parameters of the Job Investment Fund, which you will find on the city's website as well as on the EDC's website. And so in that, we will go out and visit with this company. We have been doing that since I've come on board, and are ensuring that any of the companies that have any type of incentives with our community are held to accountable. And we have been in communication with Mr. Davis, the city manager, and others to ensure that we have a straight line of communication as to what's happening at the EDC. So if this company doesn't meet this threshold, they're required to pay the monies back. And that's something that we have outlined in the lease, as well as the memorandums that we have in conjunction with the city. So based off of the thresholds that are on the city's website, as well as ours, this project qualifies for a minimum of $400,000, and that's what the request is today, for the funding of $400,000 to assist with further development of this project.
Thank you, Ms. Dyke. Any questions, Commissioner Howard?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Maybe Mr. Mayor, maybe I need to ask this question to Derek, but let me ask you a question. And negotiate this contract with these 92 employees that they will hire to invest in this $21 million project, was there any, since it's a grant, with some stipulation that those 92 should be local citizens, since it is the taxpayer money we're using?
It is not in the parameters of the job investment funds that they were required to hire local citizens. Obviously, we encourage that, and we're working with Albany Tech and other entities to get local citizens in place. But according to the parameters of the job investment funds, it is not a requirement. And that's established by the city.
Mr. Mayor, not to say anything that about, the long-term finance, board member, but what I'm concerned about, a company that has a revenue of $100 million and $400,000 would just be a drop in the bucket for them. And I do have some concern, because I remember when this long-term fund was established under former Mayor Adams, that this was the ratepayers' money, and some kind of way we just got to try to make sure that we get the bang book for giving this $400,000 as a grant rather than a loan. But however, we did do the same thing a couple of years ago. When this money is drawn down from the job investment funds, that some kind of way be tied to local citizens that could be hired within the city of Albany, Georgia. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Mayor Pro Tem?
No question.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Well, it's almost a comment, and I think Commissioner Howard will go back, and Mr. Davis will remember, a little over 2 years ago, we were getting complaints on National and Lennon and McGregor, which is both in my ward. And what a lot of people don't understand, and then after I handed it off to Sharon Subadan, and she thought that this might be a better project for the county, and then we looked at Albany Tech, a testimony to us being so good to the previous companies that have been here. I believe the original owners of McGregor almost gave this land away. And one thing that I was astounded to find out, isn't there like 30 acres out that back door that is owned by this company? So the potential of growth was unreal, and this company was, last I talked, they were like, if we put it in the hands of somebody that will really make a growth, we'll give it to them. And I would like to, when all this comes about, publicly thank the McGregor people. We talked with them, they live up north, and thank you for staying on it, because you made it. I mean, it was a massive project, and just by them not having to pay for this piece of property, it enabled them to come down here and create these almost 100 jobs, and the potential of going out that back door is going to be huge in time. So
They've actually already bought an additional property behind it.
Yeah,
since
it was
then, or
huge.
looking at another one.
Yeah, it was cool, and I love the fact that I do hope that they get a letter from you and the commissioners one day thanking them for making this, because they hadn't given this project, this piece of property up, it might have just been the building that Mr. Norman would have got a call on every week. It needs to be mowed. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Warburton?
Yeah, but Ms. Dyke, so,
With the Georgia Realtor Association, they are actually in 4 buildings that are all right there within close proximity, and as well as a couple of other locations in our community, and they have various capacities that are there.
yeah, so they're kind of spread out. This is
Yes,
going to
sir.
bring them all into one location.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
But they are keeping the other locations as well.
Okay. I can't say how excited I am about this. I mean, I guess I can say, but it's very exciting. When you look at the city of Albany, not just to have the jobs, but to have a blighted building, that's a huge eyesore, and for this company to come in and to take that property, I don't know if anybody's been by it lately, but I mean, they are just going at it full bore, trying to get that building renovated, built, whatever they're going to do to get it, ready for their occupants. So I'm just extremely excited. And so this 400,000 is purely for their investment.
Correct.
Right.
Based off of the thresholds that they met, it is purely for that, and it can be used in a number of ways for the development as outlined by the parameters of the job
Right.
investment funds.
And when you think about it as a city, this is job investment fund. I mean, you look at it from an investment standpoint. This project, building, renovation, jobs, the whole 9 yards is going to be a great return on our investment from what they've already demonstrated, what they're doing right now, and what that building is going to become. We had a tour at the new grocery store going in there on Slappy and Gordon, and talking to those owners that they weren't down the street, that hopefully will be patrons of the new grocery store that's going in right there on Slappy. So just a lot of activity happening right there, and this is really exciting. So I'm really excited about this. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Young?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your work, Ms. Dykes, and in helping bring this to South Albany. I do share some of the same reservations that Commissioner Howard shares in terms of, I guess, this job creation. And, when we're talking about investment, we have to look at exactly whether or not that investment is reaching our citizens, our people. One of the things that, I'm focused on is, development of our citizens, development of our community. I absolutely hope that the people of South Albany, and, just to make a correction to Ms. Fletcher's point, that that's actually in my ward, so it's on the other side of the street in Ward 6. So, but what I do understand, and that it is a reality for probably many of the residents in my, people who may be unqualified, may be not prepared mentally to go to work at a place such as this. And, when we invest these monies, when we invest public dollars, right into a business, it's going to benefit the business, but it may not benefit our citizens, because, we'll have, other communities come in, apply for these jobs, and that money is going right back out of our community. Again, I applaud industry locating here, and this is not on you, this is not on EDC, but it's on, us as a commission to make sure that we're placing monies where we're going to get our bang for our buck. And I think we need to start workers that can work at a facility such as this, so we can have kids who go to school with full tummies, that they go to school not, kind of being to work at this type of facility. So again, as far as economic development, I'm very happy for this, but I do want to point out to make our citizens' lives better, so they can take advantage of these businesses that choose to locate here.
Mr. Mayor, could I
Sure.
just add one thing? In response to that, Commissioner Young, Outdoor Network has sponsored several food drives with the Coca-Cola plant. I'm still learning everything again, I apologize. but they have sponsored not only the products that were distributed at that facility that day, but they've all come down to be involved in the community. And those are the partners that we want and that we definitely want to work with. And that's kind of, you know, that's our focus as well, because we want our community to continue to grow and see and prosper. And we want to be able to help tell that story about prosperity.
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Dyke, I want to commend you and EDC for this project. As the mayor, I sit on the payroll, and that's pretty simple, but the complex problem is attracting industry where people are going to have economic opportunity in our community. One thing I can say, I'm very thankful, grateful that we have this job investment fund, because this is a piece of the funding stack. I mean, businesses are very sophisticated now. As Ms. Dyke said, a lot of businesses insist on tax abatements. In other words, if I'm coming to your community and I'm making this investment, I'm not going to pay property tax for X numbers of years. We've done that with Procter & Gamble here. You say, well, that's not fair. Well, it sort of shows that Procter & Gamble is going to stay here for a long time. And this issue about jobs is central to all the problems we have in this community. Loss of population, crime, poverty. When you look at what happened between 2000 and 2010, we lost Bob's Candies, then we lost Merck and Cooper Tire. Now, the fact is, these folks, 2,000 jobs went with Cooper Tire. I mean, that was a hammer blow to this community. And one thing I would like nothing more than to announce the opening of a plant that's going to hire 1,500 people. But that's just not on the horizon. But what we are doing, and I want to commend Ms. Dyke, is 90 jobs at the time. The Gordon Hotel, 80 jobs at the time. Food for Less, 60 jobs. I mean, we're getting there. We are creating jobs. And this is a issue, if you just want to talk about this job investment fund, I'm looking, the Coates and Clark expansion, that was about 100 jobs. But it also keeps Coates and Clark here for the long period of time. Food for Less, we've mentioned, in downtown, Hotel Gordon, Victoria Fields, the Flint, the Flats at 229. This job investment fund played a part in making all this possible. And that is furthering the revitalization of our downtown. And I think this is a pretty easy call, as it's just going to bring this to fruition. And contrary to what some people might say, this company's made a $20 million investment. They're just not gonna take $400,000 and walk away from it. And I'm thankful that we have access to these funds, and I think it is a worthwhile investment, because the long term return on these funds is going to be exponentially greater than what we invest in at this time. Thank you, Ms. Dunn.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is discussion of amending the millage rate, a rollback.
Unfortunately, it usually comes after we've adopted the budget, but we typically take that into consideration when we're preparing our budget. And so this year we're recommending that we roll back our millage rate again for the 7th consecutive year. Over that time frame, that will equate to about a 3.6% reduction in our millage rate. The alternative would be keeping the millage rate at 9.668. If we do that, it is tantamount to a tax increase. That's what the state technically brings. And again, it would have the perception of a tax increase. Would equate to an additional $53,000 for the city if we did that. But our recommendation is to adopt the rollback rate of 9.631.
Thank you, Mr.
It would require that we advertise our 5-year history for 7 days prior to you taking the vote. So if the consensus today is that we will roll it back, then we'll advertise tomorrow in the Herald to satisfy that 7-day requirement, and as well as posting it on our website. And then we would advertise it again, meet that requirement by advertising tomorrow.
If I could interrupt, if Finance Director is correct, the legislature calls that a backdoor tax increase, and they passed special legislation requiring 3 hearings for it. And so this,
Mayor Pro Tem?
Mr. Brown, so if a property was reassessed at a higher rate and the millage rate stays where it is, then the owner of that property would actually pay more in taxes, wouldn't they?
Right, simply based on that reassessment. So if someone did improve the value of their property and it was reassessed, so they would pay more, even if we kept it the same. Probably wouldn't be applicable to the vast majority of people.
Mr. Fletcher?
Nothing else.
Mr. Warmington?
Nothing else, that's it.
Mr. Young?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Brown. How can we get to a utility rollback? What do we need to do that? Because, we had our talk, and, right now, you told me over 50% of the city's budget is being taken care of with, by ratepayers. So what can we honestly do to give them some relief as we're doing with property taxpayers?
What we're trying to cover right now is this one. We'll absolutely have that discussion with you, and we can look at some things that we can do, but that is not the consideration that we're asking for this morning.
But I asked the question of the finance director.
But the finance director don't have the means to do that. That's why I'm answering the question for you, sir.
So I can't get any kind of just his ideas or thoughts or anything.
I wouldn't do that off the top of my head because I don't want to throw things out there that I can't do for you. I will have a discussion with you or any other commissioners if you choose to have that discussion. But I don't want to be on the spot and start trying to give you ideas about how we can reduce the rates because we haven't actually studied that as an option. And when we do that, we can give you some sound ideas at what we can do.
Okay, and I think I did ask you that question when we had our budget hearing, so I will look forward to that.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Young. One thing, at our last retreat, Commissioner Lane's staff mentioned, I don't know if some other cities do it, half of a percent of the millage rate would be dedicated to recreation. And I see we've reduced the millage rate, was it 7 consecutive years?
Yes, sir.
I would like to see if we're going to revive our recreation programs, we're going to have some funding for it. And we remember that presentation I made at the retreat, I put everybody to sleep, for the history. I mean, our staffing levels are down considerably to our facilities. We're going to have ongoing maintenance, and we're going to have to increase the number of employees we have. And I think we need to do this, be involved if the millage rate was increased. Mr. Lane's staff mentioned, and of course he didn't commit to it. I think he was just saying we could look at it, and I think he did also note that the millage rate has been consistently reduced in recent years. So if we could get some numbers there, Mr. Brown,
right?
Because we talk about recreation and we move forward and we improve our facilities, but we don't have people to staff them and we can't pay the light bill and cut the grass. We really hadn't accomplished much. So I think this is a time we need to look at that. And okay, well, I mean, if we had a increase to 975, I'd like to see what that number is. If we're gonna have 3 meetings and how that would impact somebody that has a $100,000 house. Could we do that?
Yes, sir. And I guess we need some guidance today, I guess, because if the consensus is not to roll it back, I guess we need to know that so we won't move forward with our plans to advertise the 5-year history tomorrow. So I guess we do need some guidance from you all today on that.
My personal feeling is I would like to take a little while to look at it and study some alternatives, but I can't, that's not a consensus. That's just.
Right. Well, we can certainly crunch the numbers. I think one full meal is approximately 1.4 million, but we can certainly get it down in other increments.
Right. But so, I mean, that's what I was thinking, that number, the $700,000 people, and but after my comments, anybody else want to speak? Commissioner Howard?
No further discussion.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Nothing further?
Commissioner Fletcher?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Warrington?
Mayor, I would say your comments are worthy of consideration. I just think at this point, we got to make a decision that we need to move forward and maybe get a consensus from the group. There's also ways to do what you're talking about, even through, you know, I've heard conversations about, you know, having a public surface fee through utilities or something like that. So instead of always being on property owners, it would be on, you know, there's all kind of ways if you want to fund, you know, public safety or quality of life through recreation. But so I guess I'm agreeing with you. I just think at this point, we need to make a decision. I guess we're under a timeline with the tax year that either we roll it back or roll it up, but we got to do one or the other.
I mean, if we're not going to roll it back, then we just need to know that, and we can make sure we don't proceed with plans to advertise the 5-year history tomorrow. I guess there's really no, well, we need to stop that because it would show the rollback rate.
That's
so
right. And then we got to schedule 3 public hearings in the month of August.
3 public hearings, right, and advertise that, I think, at least 2 weeks in advance before we have the first one. I think one has to be between 6 and 7 in the evening, so you can have that at a regular meeting. I mean, that could be the first one. Well, it might be too late to do that one just right now. So it would be probably August before we could have the very first public hearing for increasing it. Even if you left it the same, it would be considered an increase. So even if you left it the same, it went up to I think you mentioned 9.75 would be an increase, of course, and so we'd have to have 3 public hearings.
I don't know if you're asking our opinion, is to continue forward with Mr. Brown's recommendation and then take your idea up, Mayor, maybe at the retreat or something where we can have more discussions about what you and I guess Commissioner Langstaff started in the last retreat.
Yeah, I was just, Commissioner Langstaff had just mentioned that when he saw the actual decrease in the staffing levels and the investment in recreation. Ms. Young?
Yes, sir. I actually do agree with your premise, Mr. Mayor, that we do need to look at that as well, especially, again, since, you know, a lot of or the majority of the general fund is coming off the backs of utility payers. We've, you know, as Mr. Brown said, consistently left the tax rate or rolled it back, you know, for going on 6 years now. And, you know, some of that relief needs to come off of, you know, the ratepayers. Again, as we, you know, kind of pat ourselves on the back for being in good fiscal shape, there are still people who have high utility bills. And that's the reason we're able to kind of, you know, pat ourselves on the back and not have to kind of do the heavy lifting of looking at budget cuts and cutbacks in our different departments. But I think that's something that we need to explore to make sure not only taxpayers, property taxpayers or people who own property see some relief, but ratepayers as well, because we can't, as a city, you know, kind of just glad hand and cheer when one set of people see relief. When we have a whole, I think Albany is probably somewhere around 60% renters to 40% homeowners, and you know, we have to look at those type statistics and see exactly where we can provide relief for everyone across the board. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, with that, Mr. Brown, I will withdraw my recommendation. But this is a direction I want to follow. So, I mean, we can just go ahead with this, as Commissioner Warrington said, but, I mean, I want us to start thinking now. Nobody wants to raise the millage rate. I want to see how that would impact if we come up, if you're going down to 9.631, what 9.75 and 10 would do, with the understanding that those funds in coming years would be dedicated to recreation, like Commissioner Langstaff. I mean, we're in a city where our youth, 40%, are living at or below the poverty level. We can't fund our recreation programs through registration fees if we're gonna get people in the programs. And so that's, if,
That gives us the guidance we need. We'll
Yes,
move
sir.
forward this way, but we'll know next year.
no, well, what I'm saying is, we need to start working on it in the middle of, even before the budget season.
Right.
See what our numbers are.
Right.
Because actually, it might be a little premature before we get the recreation master plan and know where we're going, and maybe the recreation master plan will tell us what an optimal staffing level for the recreation department.
Right.
So, but with that, we thank you, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir.
Next, the city manager's update.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you. There's going to be a document that we publish each week with the city manager's updates in it. We'll make sure we share those documents.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Items for future agenda. Commissioner Howard,
Have nothing at this time.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Nothing at this time.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Well, yes, sir, and, today was almost a perfect, example of Commissioner Warmington and what he's doing with his ward. Mr. Willie Williams is the head of the Putney Neighborhood Association, and probably meetings, I've seen anywhere from 100 to 80 people consistently show up, and he came to my place Saturday and a little concerned about neighborhood watches not getting back up, not really, you know, just wanting to be able to talk more about the COVID shots, several issues that he feels like people are sort of missing the boat on or not getting information out because of lack of neighborhoods. And he wanted to know, Mayor, would we consider maybe picking an area to where it's sort of centrally located, advertise it pretty heavily, reach out, you know, we would have speakers of the COVID vaccination and of other things that's coming along. And he's trying to get them back. He just asked me would I bring that to the table to see if we couldn't get it kick-started.
Okay, so what we're talking about is what, a community meeting?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what he said, a community neighborhood watch, and then maybe it'll help figure out that what one side's going through, all is going through, and just communication, because we've lost so many of our people and we just don't know where they're at.
I didn't know that till last summer. My preacher mentioned that there were statistics showing, or projections, that a lot of people were gonna get out of routines.
Mhm.
He was talking about people, clubs and associations, so that's one thing. But Mr. Carter, can you give us some ideas on that? I'm sure we have some neighborhood watch groups. I mean,
We can do a little research and see if we can come up with some things that we may be able to suggest for that.
well, no, I mean, I think this gentleman is saying that neighborhood watch groups in the city that have been inactive during COVID are not returning to
They're just-
patrols and,
yeah.
yeah.
And he wants to know, I mean, he's got his that he's very much in tune to. Commissioner Warmington has his, Commissioner Howard, you know, some of us are still in tune to it, but there's just so many that we've just lost sight of where they're at, you know, and he just was wanting to know and get things back on track. Like the mayor said, so many people have got to where they have stopped doing things, and I've seen some of these people that have back into a routine, and he's just wanting help and he's very popular. I mean, Commissioner Howard knows him very well, and he can pound this information out of all of us, take it upon ourselves to get a date and get a central location.
I guess if we have a list of the community watch.
Together for us and share it.
Okay, we appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Anything else?
No, that's it, thank you.
Mr. Warmington.
So I guess, I don't know if this is a new agenda item or other business, but I was going to ask Mr. Carter, from the central building, government building standpoint, I would like to request that we look at our security cameras. I think that we have had some issues with cameras in general around downtown, and my understanding is we're extremely lacking in that area. So if that's something that we as the city, county together, that might be a project we move forward with collectively together to make sure the perimeter of the building is covered, make sure offices are covered up and downstairs, the different floors, So we, have records of who come and go, who's here after hours, who, we have in here. We don't, what I understand is we don't have, the camera coverage that we should have. So,
No, the only camera coverage at the building right now is the one that covered the drop box when we were doing the election. There's upgrade the camera
okay,
system.
well, it sounds like you're a step ahead, but certainly I would want to indicate from my standpoint that as a priority. I think most businesses or most, you need to have cameras at your doors, cameras at the public areas, Publix, cameras up and down the different floors, just.
City buildings with that. So we'll try to incorporate that here at this building. And again, I'm already working with Mr. McCoy on this.
Good deal. Thank you.
Mr. Young? Yeah, I wanted to, I guess, with Mr. Hamilton, in terms of the transportation of the ATI, I know we have a number of bus stops that have not, well, in some recent days have been either taken down to facilitate, I think, the requirement of the ADA requirements, and that's been going very slow. Mr. Hamilton mentioned that at one point we were taking care of this with city staff or public works to redo these bus stops, and I wanted to see if we could bring it to the table to maybe look at or research putting those out for bid so that could get done a little sooner. I know, we've been talking about increases in concrete and construction costs and those type things, but just to kind of study that to see if we can, because I know a number of bus stops over in Ward 6 is absolutely outright I've been kind of leaning on him to, let's see if we can go ahead and get that done. But if he can't kind of speed up the process with Public Works doing the work, maybe we should look to outside help to get that done. I don't know if you want to.
We'll take a look at the budget impacts of that and see where we can pull the money from to move that project along. He talked to me about that, and that is something that's on our radar. So we'll look at our budget impacts and see where we can make sure that those things start moving more rapidly than we have in the past.
Okay. And also another opportunity, food desert. As many of you know, that I'm heavily involved in working on the food desert that compromises a lot of my ward. We also have a food desert on the east side as well. President Biden has released more information funds to kind of solve that problem by using our local farmers and farmers here in Southwest Georgia. Because of the structure of the market, a lot of those, small farmers or their farms get their produce to inside these stores. They get it inside Walmart, Publix, the larger grocery local farmers out of Lee County, and had put some of their stuff in place. But I want to look for more opportunities now that the federal, whatever you want to call them, small producers who drive through the streets and pick up trucks. You might see some of the locations where they're located down at Jimmy's or over across the street. All market setups, in places like maybe near Highland Park or those traditional places where those farmers are, to set up, the city could build stalls or something for them to have that. I think that would go a long way when folks drive past, you're thinking about something to eat, you see Burger King, you see McDonald's, you see you're selling fresh produce. Maybe you choose that to take that home to your family and prepare. So definitely want to look at that with that guidance from the administration. But that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Carter, I think $10 million we got from the American Rescue Plan, I think solved our concern with the funds we also got from the state and what SPLOST money is available. It's my understanding financing the first year.
Yes, we're good for
roughly 15 million, but still we have discussed, I was stunned when Ms. Subadan gave us and Mr. Brown gave us a share of the SPLOST proceeds would have gone to that project. So I understand we're continue to pursue additional funds, but I think in adjustments and because we need to start raising funds to pay for this project. And if we gradually increase rates, it's going to be a lot easier. Well, not easier, but I mean, well, less onerous on the public than if we get in a situation and we have to raise rates 10, 15% in 1 year because we didn't plan for the long range. I think we need to go ahead and have some different proposals for funding the whole $105 million over the next 10 years, and the commission needs to make some decisions about it, with the understanding that if other federal funds come available, you know, we can readjust those numbers.
Yeah, let you know how the funds that we've had now have affected what that long-term plan was. And one of the things I want to make sure everybody keep in mind is as we're starting trying to raise this money, we're talking about that 4-year goal that we're trying to hit right now, because we're already into 1 year, that 5 years. We can't still be raising money at the end of the 5 years. We have to have the money already raised so that the project can be done by the.
If we're going to have to have a bond, whatever, Mr. Brown can get those options to us, but
right,
we need to go ahead and start raising the funds now, so you and I are saying the same thing.
Exactly.
Secondly, I would like, since the city gives the River Aquarium $200,000 a year and the Civil Rights Museum $100,000 a year, I think we should consider talking with those institutions about having appointments to their boards.
Okay.
Next meeting, but the second meeting, as to the federal funds that were allocated, theater, right. The Ritz Theater, another talking about sticker shock, when I saw Mr. Maskey, it's about a $4 million project, and that was 5 years ago. But right. We've got $2 million from the federal government. So I think obviously we need to start looking at what we're going to do with SPLOST, and that needs to be something that's going to be on the agenda, because the federal funding makes what I thought was a pipe dream something that we can achieve.
Right.
And we need to do that. And also with the Driscoll Park, I mean, how is this money? I think it's going to free up money for other recreation programs.
It will. We had a lot of the SPLOST money allocated to Driscoll Park this year. With the allocation that we've been made aware of, we can reallocate some of that money now.
Yeah, so these other projects we've talked about, the funding's there, and you know, as well, but I think that would be the appropriate expenditure.
We'll bring some suggestions to you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
For doing an article on me this week from the Herald, Alan Malden, and I want you to know, Mr. Malden, but the calls that I received, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner, a lot of individuals have called me and said that they had diabetes and other health issues, and so I told them, I said, well, try my plan. I'm not a doctor, but try my plan, and it did work. But the article was so enthused, it went as far as Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Rochester, New York, and this, not the sad part, it was emailed to one of my relatives. She's 104 years old, and she has diabetes and have some niece and nephew that juvenile diabetes. So, Alan, the article was well one issue in the southern states of the United States.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Nothing further.
Mr. Fletcher?
Nothing further.
Ms. Warmington?
No other business.
Ms. Young?
That's it.
I had just asked that we discuss moving the speaker appearance to the end of the agenda, and that wasn't on the agenda, so Ms. Talbot, can we get it on the agenda for the work session?
I'll call you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now, we have on the agenda some items for executive session. Would any member of the commission make a motion?
Move that we go into executive session to discuss personnel issues and land acquisition.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Okay.
No discussion.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No discussion.
Commissioner Fletcher?
No discussion.
Commissioner Warmington?
No discussion.
Ms. Young?
No discussion.
Could we call the roll, Ms. Talbot?
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 5 votes yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes.